It was late September of 2007. I had met up with who would turn out to be my ex-girlfriend. Planned on making her my wife, but things didn't work out. This story takes place 2 years prior to the wreck that claimed my trusty 300 Honda. After recovery, I replaced it with a brand new 2006 Honda 500 Foreman with the same manual shift I'd grown to love. Well, myself and my girlfriend, a little gal from Southern California that I'd met online and flew out to Eastern Kentucky, had spent the winter of '07 together and had some great times that stretched into summer. She was a little city girl and I've always been a large-framed country boy. I guess it was a natural fit in a way. But to the point. On a late September ride through an area known as Cow Fork, located in my old stomping grounds of Wolf Creek, I decided to show her the area before we would leave out for California. She insisted on putting together a picnic, and I insisted on bringing one of my .22 rifles, a stainless steel Marlin Model 795, as well as a Ruger .22-45 handgun. I made a detour before we headed for our picnic spot that overlooked a familiar stop-off point. She had never seen Cow Fork, and I hadn't been up there after my wreck in '05, so after talking things over, the detour was welcomed. I remembered a popular camping area that might serve as picnic place should the weather begin to turn. The ride through the fork was rougher going than she was used to, but it was no real problem. After a few miles and the sun beating down on the dirt path, the shade of the campground would feel awesome. Until I made the stop. Something felt off. I shut the engine down, got off, and had the notion that I was being watched. There was a large rectangular tent made out of blue and gray tarps. I didn't think anything of it really because people would build cover like that for camping trips or extended stays during hunting seasons. But my girlfriend didn't like the sight of it one bit. There was a solid outer door with a frame like what you would expect on a single-wide trailer. There were no fresh vehicle tracks leading to or from the site, and just to play it safe, I removed the semi-auto rifle from its case on the front rack, popped a magazine in, and put an extra in my front pocket. The .22 pistol was already loaded in a nylon holster, and it too had an extra magazine. I then slung the rifle on my left shoulder, muzzle down. It would be faster for me to bring it into action like that. Erica got off the ATV and stuck to me like glue as both of us walked up to the front door of the establishment. Being raised with manners, I politely knocked on the door and asked if anyone was home. I noticed that Erica was very nervous when no one answered. She muttered something about it seeming like a scene out of a horror movie. I laughed a little. As I knocked again, with another call just to be sure we didn't startle someone out of a deep sleep and end up in bad shape. Still no answer. I unslung my rifle and used the butt of the weapon to gently push the door open. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up on end and I checked top to bottom and scanned before entering the structure. Erica clinging onto my shirt, highly afraid. I went back to my militia training of looking everywhere before I set a foot down. As I made the turn into the tent, I saw an old couch with a folded-out bed, freshly made, as well as a small Coleman stove lit and set to boil a kettle of water. That's when I got the rock in the gut feeling that we should just stop and leave. Erica tugged at my shirt, whispering low in a very frightened voice, "Poppy, let's get out of here, now." I didn't want to add to her fears, so I stayed calm. "That's what we're gonna do, doll babe." She turned to run back to the ATV and I pulled rear security, keeping my head on a swivel with my trigger finger hovering over the safety button. Once I was satisfied with the distance, I turned and mounted the ATV after slinging the rifle across my back, muzzle up. Fired up the engine and left the way we had rode in. It takes a lot to make me uneasy, but I was glad that we didn't stick around that spot too much longer. At first I figured it could have just been someone I'd known camping out, but if they were there and had heard my voice, they would have answered. The thing that really got me was the fact that the water in the kettle was still sloshing from side to side, and nobody would leave a gas stove lit without someone to watch it, unless they wanted a burned-down camp to come back to. I tried to chalk it up to gross overreaction, which could have very well been the case. But still, too many things didn't fit. Erica was pale as a ghost and finally calmed down when we were far away and digging into the picnic. We spent the rest of that day plinking at empty pop cans with the 22s and enjoying the sunset and the starlit sky of our night ride back home across the main drag of the strip.
So I've posted here before, and while unfortunately I was smart in my previous experiences, apparently that sense of preservation didn't follow me into my teen years. To be fair, this is long. Anyways, when I was about 16, my best friend, we'll just call her C for privacy purposes, and I met a guy at the park one night whom we ended up hanging out with for the summer and the following years. We'll call him J. J was a teen illegal, which was relevant only because the apartments he lived in were literally all illegals except for this one white guy, who wasn't exactly great himself. So, C and I had become accustomed to showing up at the apartments at all random times, and half of the complex knew us, but they only knew us as Jay's white girls. Nothing we took offence to, since the majority of the time we were given free drinks and bud just to chill with these guys, most of whom were older but pretty chill. That is, until Caesar. This guy was 38 years old, easily 6+ feet, and tiny/wiry looking, but stronger than he looked. For that I'm definite. My first time meeting him was just past my 16th birthday, when he had invited Jay and his cousins to come to my mum's while she was out for the day to drink and hang out. He gave Jay a ride, and when we came outside to say hi and bring the guys in, Caesar just stood back, just grinning this creepy ass grin. That's when Jay said, "Hey, Harley Quinzel, he just wants to fuck you since he gave us a free ride." I just laughed too, like, what the fuck? I thought it was a joke, but they kept persisting, and finally I got pissed and yelled, "Fuck you guys, I'm not a whore," and went back inside. Caesar got mad, cussing, and finally got back in his car, slamming the door shut and peeling out. Obviously not a great first impression. So a couple of months later, during a school break, probably summertime since it was pretty easy to pull the flip on our parents saying I was just staying at C's house and she was staying at mine, we decided to head to the apartment. We went up to Jay's first, but he wasn't home, so we went to one of the other guys' places that we knew. Guess who lived there? Yep, Caesar. I went to leave, but then he told C that Jay and the other guys knew we were coming and went to the store, so to come in and chill till they got back. He mentioned us inside, introduced his friends, and mentioned a pack of 30. Of course, being the dumbass teens that we were like, okay. And I figured since we had C's brother with us, I'll just call him A. We figured had protection and we'd be just fine. At first, everything was fine, but I kept getting creepy vibes and would catch Caesar just staring at me. Caesar kept commenting on what a pretty girl I was, and look at her hair and them nice breasts. I was wearing a short cut jean skirt and a super low cut shirt, because to be honest, I hella digged Jay at the time. I kept getting more and more weirded out until finally I said fuck it, let's go, and waited for Jay and the rest to come back later. Immediately, he got mad again and stormed off to the room calling me a bitch and tease and some other shit in Spanish that I didn't understand. I got up to leave and his friend, whose name I don't remember, told us to calm down and we could go to his other friend's apartment in the same complex to wait for Jay. Did I mention teens are extremely stupid? We agreed and went across the walkway to the other apartment. The men there were younger and actually a lot of fun. I finally relaxed and ended up sharing some tequila with a guy who was closer to my age, so like 18, 19. We were all taking pictures, just having a good time really. A, who was supposed to be our protection and look out for us, got trashed and ended up using the bed in one of their rooms to sleep in for a bit. Everything was fine, but it was pushing 2 AM and the guys wanted to get more alcohol before they stopped selling it. So they left us in their apartment and said they'd be right back. It was cool. They were nice, right? I decided to lay on the bed to talk to A to see if he was sobering up. He had been lying the traditional long way, so I lay crossway on my stomach with my legs dangling over the bed, with my arms stretched in front of me by his legs, trying to tap him to get him to respond. He was out cold. The next thing I knew, the light was turned off, and I heard the door shut. I didn't think much of it, figuring that the guy had come back and thought I was asleep. That was until I felt my arm being grabbed and held down by somebody laying on top of me, using their legs to force mine apart. The next thing I knew, a hand was up my skirt, pushing, and I tried to get up. I pushed back down and could only smell sour breath. Before I could cry, scream, or say anything, the door flies open, the lights turn on, and the guy jumps off me. I turn around and see C standing there in the doorway yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" "Holly Quinzel, I need you now." She burst into the room to grab me, and when I looked up, guess who? Turns out Caesar had seen the guys leave but without us and came over to realise the door was unlocked. C saw him enter the room as she was coming out of the bathroom and bust in because she knew he was a creep. Just as he goes running out of the apartment, the other guys come back, see him running, see me crying and shaking, and they put 2 and 2 together. 2 of them, including the younger one I was talking to all night, chased him back down, pounding on the door, screaming about killing him, and he's better not to come out, amongst other things. They finally come back, calm me down and get the story. Younger guy wants to go back with a weapon and I beg everybody to drop it. Finally, Jay and the guys were waiting on comeback, but end up taking to Caesar first. They weren't actually aware we were coming, and the best part is, they blamed me for what he did, and then got mad that we were at somebody's apartment that we didn't know. What the fuck? I stopped hanging around with them shortly after that, but I was never comfortable going near those apartments again. So to Jay, Caesar and all the others, please let's not meet again, because next time I might not have somebody watching my back.
In January of 2014, I started smoking pot with my stepbrother Hayden. He was 22 or 23 at the time. At first, I didn't want to do it. Then, after being peer pressured, I did. I was 13 years old. We would be smoking pot with each other 2 or 3 times a week, usually on the weekend. In May 2014, we were smoking pot and I noticed that this didn't seem right at all. After about 5 minutes, I became limp. We were in his room. I laid down on the floor, hoping that it would go away. but it didn't. He then picked me up, ripped off my clothes, groped my breasts, and made me be on top of him. I couldn't move at all. I tried to scream no, but it just turned into a faint whisper. He took advantage of me being limp and raped me. I felt motionless. I just remember staring at the wall, wanting to cry my eyes out, and him moaning. After he was done, he put on Futurama and he wouldn't let me leave his room. I passed out. I was 14 years old when he raped me. When I woke up, it was Monday morning. I snuck out of his room, put on clothes, and went to school. I remember having sharp pain down there and walking funny. One of my friends asked what happened. I told her about how my stepbrother took advantage of me, and she told me she wouldn't tell anyone. 2 hours later, everyone at school is asking me if it was true. And I told them that it wasn't. I didn't want to be taken away from my mom. It wasn't her fault. She was asleep when it happened, and he knew no one would have heard me. I get home and head upstairs to my room. My stepdad was home, but my mom was at work. My stepbrother came into my room, covered my mouth, and dragged me into his room. He raped me again. This happened for a month and a half. After him raping me the first time, I began to cut myself, usually on my upper thigh so no one would see it when I wear shorts. No one knew that I self-harmed, except for my stepbrother, because he would rip my clothes off when I told him no, repeatedly. No one even noticed that I was abused. I acted like my normal depressed self. I acted like it didn't happen and that we got along. July 2014. I'm still smoking pot with him because I didn't have much of a choice. He stopped raping me, but wouldn't let me stop smoking pot. Hayden, his friend Hayden, and I are there in his room getting high. I smoked too much and couldn't walk straight, so I went back to my room. A half hour later, Hayden comes into my room. He lays down on my bed. At this point, I felt extremely uncomfortable. He forcibly kissed me. He then unbuttoned his pants and pulled out his dick. I asked him what he was doing. He said, "I'll leave your room once you suck on it." I refused to. He kept pressuring me into doing it. He wouldn't leave me alone. He was groping at me and I told him to stop. I asked him to leave nicely, then it got to the point where I yelled at him to get the fuck out of my room. And then he forced me to perform oral sex on him. He came in my mouth. After he did, he left my room. I ran into the bathroom, spitting it out, with how disgusting it tasted and how disgusted I felt. I threw up as well. I stayed in the bathroom crying for an hour. I went back to my room and pulled out my blade and made a deep cut into my leg. After it stopped bleeding, I fell asleep. The next morning, I was walking to the bathroom and Aiden saw me. He saw the cut that had dried up on my leg. He said to me, "If you want to kill yourself, just do it. It would make the world a better place and no one would care. You can overdose on pills. And cut your body down the street, not across." This was just fucking fantastic to hear. You know, after me feeling like shit and already wanting to kill myself. December 2014. I'm still cutting. I have scars all over my body. I started to cut more onto my wrists since more blood would come out than on my legs. Also, with it being cold, I could cover it with my bracelets and my hoodie. When I got home from school one day, I took a shower and had my bracelets off. When I got out of the shower, my mom was home and saw my cuts. We went to the doctors to get antidepressants and a therapist. The next day, December 8th, 2014, my friend Nick committed suicide. he hung himself. I felt horrible because he called me the night before when I was asleep. I wasn't there for him. A couple weeks later, on December 27th, my 3-month-old nephew, August, passed away. This was Hayden's kid. I felt horrible because Hayden's girlfriend wouldn't let me in August's life. The first time I saw my nephew was the last time I saw him. I remember watching my mom give him CPR on the piano bench, and his face was blue. I thought it was a nightmare and I would wake up any minute, but it wasn't. March 29th, 2015. At 10 at night at my dad's house, I decided I was going to take my own life. I did what Aiden told me. Overdose and slit my main vein. I overdosed on Advil, Tylenol, ibuprofen, NyQuil, and some other medication I can't remember. After 20 minutes, I ran into my dad's room and told him what I did. He took me to the hospital and we arrived at 11:03 p.m. I remember looking up at the ceiling and seeing the collage logos, drinking the disgusting charcoal water, the cold IV going to my body, and seeing my dad watching his daughter try to come back. I was released 12 hours later and was in outpatient for the next week. I was put on new antidepressants and got a new therapist. I don't think of her as a therapist, though. I think of her as a friend. One day in June, I told her about Aiden. She asked if my mom knew, and I said no. She brought my mom in the room and I told her what happened. She started crying, saying that it was her fault not looking out for me. We told her it wasn't her fault at all. He knew when it would be the right time to do it. The week after that, my mom and I went to the police to report Aiden. It was too late to throw his ass in jail because there was no evidence anymore. It sucks, but I knew they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Whenever someone asks Hayden or Aiden what happened, they would just say that I was asking to perform oral sex on Aiden. From them saying that, I'll be called a slut, whore, and a cum dumpster. Hayden tells me that he's there for me, yet he backstabbed me and raped me. I'm doing better now than I was then. I haven't reported Hayden because I don't want to be taken away from my parents. The only people that know about Hayden raping me are my boyfriend and my ex. I'm a year clean from marijuana, and 3 months clean from self-harming.
This happened to me just about 2 hours ago, around 4:30 a.m, and I can't get back to sleep. Every creak or drip now makes me jump. I only stopped trembling about 20 minutes ago. So, I was asleep on my friend's couch and woke up to the sight of someone opening their front door. They may have said something to me through the crack, or something or other, but I just know that it was the door that woke me up. This tall, very slender lady, in a long red/salmon-coloured dress, or something, poked her head through the door and started to move towards me. I tried to pretend to still be asleep, but once she knelt down next to me, I knew the jig was up. I fully opened my eyes and looked over at her, trying to make out her face. She just put her hand on my shoulder and started asking me questions that I really didn't understand. The sentences just seemed jumbled and incoherent despite the fact that she was speaking English, the only language that I know. She was holding a couple of papers. Almost seemed like she was trying to ask me some kind of questions of it. I sat up and asked why she just walked inside, and she said she was from some department or something and asked for my name. I didn't respond and just kind of looked around. I debated calling out my friends or just doing a runner to one of their rooms, but I feared for my physical safety. I grabbed my phone to call one of them after the most awkward 30 seconds of silence, and she just told me, "I can see you're not ready yet. It's okay," and touched my arm and calmly walked out. I saw her walk towards the street from the window. I immediately made sure that all the doors were locked, as these friends usually don't lock up. which I'm sure is just about the only way she managed to walk in. In sheer shock, I tried to wake my friends up via phone and just sat on the couch waiting for my heart to stop racing, or at least slow down. After 15 minutes, I went upstairs and woke them up. The friend I know better, Max, thought it was weird but was mostly concerned. He apologised that this happened to me and went back to bed. The other friend, Brock, emphasised that I was so freaked out. We sat in the stairwell for a bit before he went back to bed. I'm now on the couch, but I don't know how to sleep anymore. I've never felt more frightened or unnerved.
My boyfriend and I had gotten a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit on the top, second floor of a lower-end apartment complex about 8 years ago. The economy had gone to shit, so with job troubles, we had to get what we could afford. Our apartment was up a flight of stairs that went up parallel to the building, came to a small landing, and then you turned 90 degrees to the right and went up more stairs to the second floor. The area at the top of the stairs, if you were facing the building, had our door on the right side, some space for a couple chairs, the stairs in the middle, some space for a couple chairs, and the door for the 1-bedroom unit next to us on the left. The 1-bedroom was on the corner of the building we were in. Our building faced another building that was identical to ours. There were 2 buildings to the far side of our building, one next to us and one across from that. A large grassy space between the 1-bedroom next to me and another set of 4 apartment buildings in the same configuration. A path ran down the middle of all the buildings. Each set of stairs ended at the sides of the path, as did the path to each first-floor apartment. Over the 2 years we lived there, we saw all sorts of things. A group of Hispanic couples lived in the 1-bedroom next to us for a while. There were at least 6 people living there, sometimes more. I always hated imagining how cramped it must be in that unit, especially after I got to see inside of it a while after we'd been living there. That group was mostly quiet and didn't cause trouble. They made an effort to keep to themselves. We saw 3 different tenants, I'm calling the 6+ people one tenant, in that unit over those 2 years. The last was a single guy named Carmine that I became friends with, which was how I got to see the inside of that apartment. While living in this complex, I overheard what sounded like a life-or-death fight in the apartment under the 1-bedroom next to mine. It was so loud, so violent, so terrifying, and there was so much screaming that I reluctantly called the police. When they arrived, they found blood on the door to the apartment and a trail of blood leading away on the path between the buildings. The police broke down the door and found that the gay couple living there had gotten into a fight, and one guy had stabbed the other in the stomach. The blood trail was from the guy who had stabbed his boyfriend. Apparently, he'd cut up his hand pretty badly, and when he'd left, he'd caused the bloody mess outside. My boyfriend and I ended up having to go to court over this incident because the police came up to my unit, even though I had explicitly told them not to. The last thing you want in a bad area is to be seen cooperating with the police, and begged me to give an official statement since they said they didn't have cause to have broken the door down without it. There were a few scary and violent things that happened. More domestic abuse, a huge fight at the pool with at least 20 people, and a couple break-ins at this complex, before the following occurred. One day, in the middle of the summer, I was out in the little area by my front door having a cigarette. I don't smoke inside because A, it's gross, B, it stinks up all your stuff, and C, I don't want to expose my pets to it. We kept a big Rubbermaid container outside to store recyclables in until we could take them to the recycling plant, along with a blue fold-up camping chair and a small table with an ashtray. I had been standing next to the chair and looking over the balcony at the cat in the window of the unit directly across from me when I saw a guy come walking through on the path between all the buildings. I sat down to hide myself and so I could reach the ashtray to put out my cigarette when I heard, Hey miss." I didn't respond, put out my cigarette and stood up to go inside. "Hey girl, what's up? Excuse me," he says, and I noticed he sounded much closer. In my head, I thought if I acknowledged him, maybe he'd go away. "Yes," I said as I turned to see that he had come up to the landing in the stairs and was staring at me. He must have made an effort to be quiet because he had to weigh at least 230 pounds and was a little over 6 feet tall, and I hadn't heard the stairs so much as creak as he came up the first set, like they usually did. And he had covered the distance between where he had been and where he was now quickly. While I've taken Taekwondo and self-defense classes, I also have really bad knees and have had quite a few surgeries on them. I'm also barely 5 feet tall and weigh 110 pounds. It's best if I can avoid a physical confrontation, especially against someone that large. "Can I bum a Lucy?" he asks with this threatening look on his face. His mouth was smiling, but it was so forced and it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes made me very apprehensive. There was no warmth in them. He didn't look away, but his eyes would flick down to what he could see of me above the short wall of our little patio area and then back up. He didn't try to be nice or funny or offer to pay or hit on me or tell me why he was asking like people often do when they try to bum a smoke. Most people look a bit embarrassed and hopeful when they ask. He was glaring at me, calculating something, but at the same time had this fake wooden smile on his face. My heart was beating wildly as my brain quickly assessed the situation. I didn't like that this big guy had stealthily climbed the stairs part way, apparently in the short second or two my back was turned, just to ask for a cigarette. Why not ask before you climbed halfway, in case the answer was no, to save yourself the effort? Why was he glaring with cold eyes, but faking a smile? In my head, I remember thinking, shit, Carmine, neighbor, is at work, and so is Jason, boyfriend, so I'm on my own. I did my best to keep my fear and apprehension off my face. Out loud, I said, "I'm sorry, I don't have any more. I just smoked my last one," which was true. As I began backing towards my door, the guy sneered, "You sure?" I answered in a clear, strong voice, "Yes, I'm sure. I don't have any more. Sorry." As I finished speaking, I felt the doorknob with my hand, and not too soon, because his fake smile slipped away as he began to lunge up the rest of the stairs. The container of recyclables was right next to the door. Thankfully, I knew how to navigate around it by heart after months of lugging groceries up the stairs. I yanked the door open while twisting around, flew inside, and turned to shove the door shut. As I began to push the door, my other hand already on the deadbolt to slam it home as soon as the door was closed, the guy reached the area in front of my door. He wasn't expecting the big container, so he ran into it and stumbled forward, but managed to get his left hand out to grab the door before it closed. I had already been in a full-force push against the door, so his hand wasn't enough to stop it. It slammed with his fingers in the jamb and he hollered, yanking his hand back instinctually. I shoved the door shut as he went for the knob to open it with his other hand. With quite literally no time to spare, I twisted the latch to slide the deadbolt home. The guy then began yanking on the knob and rattling the door in its frame, twisting the doorknob back and forth trying to get it open. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed one of my dining room chairs and shoved it under the doorknob to keep the door from opening. Unfortunately for me, there was a very large window directly next to the door, in what was our living room, right over where the Rubbermaid box sat outside, which had slid partially away from the window when he fell. Between pounding on the door and screaming, "Let me in, you fucking bitch! You broke my fucking fingers, you stupid fucking whore! I'm gonna kill you when I get my hands on you! Open this goddamn door!" Among other horrible things, he would walk over to the window, cupping his hands around his face to see better, and would yell some more. I have no idea why he didn't break the window, but thankfully he didn't. I ran over and yanked my blackout curtains closed, which caused him to yell and pound on the door even louder. I had had my cell phone with me outside in the little patio area by the door while I smoked. Thankfully, I had put it in my pocket out of habit before I crushed my cigarette. It took me a frantic minute of searching to figure out where it was, all the while this guy continued to pound on and kick my door and scream obscenities. I knew that nobody else was likely to call the police, simply because in bad neighborhoods, most people don't want to get involved, but also because it was the middle of a weekday and most people weren't home. The husband of the elderly couple that lived below me was almost deaf, and his wife worked part-time during the day, so she wasn't home. I frantically called 911, and it didn't take much explaining to get the police hurrying on their way, because the operator could clearly hear this guy over the phone. While waiting for the police to arrive, I locked myself and my cats in the back bathroom and barricaded the door. I brought my thick wooden bat in with me and stayed on the phone with 911. At some point, the guy must have either given up or heard the sirens and took off before the police arrived. I gave them a more detailed description, and they searched for him in the area, but they never found him as far as I know. I called Jason, who was stuck at work on a double shift and couldn't leave, and then my mom. I ended up crating the cats and taking them over with me to spend time at my mom's so that we wouldn't be alone. It took me hours to stop shaking, and I was paranoid to the extreme the rest of the time we lived there. I never saw the guy again.
So when I was very young, my parents left me to kindergarten or a daycare centre. My dad worked at the MFA and my mum worked as a secretary at a private organisation. One day, the kindergarten's doorbell was rung by a man, which said that my dad had sent him for me to be picked up. He said he worked for the ministry and gave my name to the principal. The principal asked for his ID but was refused it by the stranger, who said that it was in his car and he would go and get it and return quickly. He never come back. When my mum came a few hours later to pick me up, the principal called her into her office and started lecturing her about their policies on how the kindergarten only delivers the kids to their parents and no one else, and told my mum not to send anyone again. My mum, in total shock, said that she didn't send anyone. A few questions that show how creepy this is 1. How did they know my name? They did not get it from any kid. They went after me. 2. How did they know my dad worked for the MFA? 3. How did they know where the kindergarten I was sent to was? The only thing I can think is that we were followed around for a while. The thing that really spooks me out? What would my life be like if I was handed over to this stranger?
When I was in my early 20s, I worked graveyard shift at a 24-hour Walmart. I worked in the toy department in the back of the store. I mainly worked alone, and once in a while, a friend would help me stock. But unless we were heavy on freight, you basically did your own thing and went home at 7 a.m. The first time I encountered the man we finally ended up calling Rat Man was around midsummer, 2 years into my job at the store. He would come in around 5 a.m. and look at all the Hot Wheels cars. He was a collector. There seems to be this group of men in their 50s to 60s who enjoy grabbing up these little cars. I normally was in the back tossing my trash and boxes when he would venture in. Never really speaking or seeing me, but I would see him come and go. One morning, I happened to be down that aisle when he came for his little 97-cent treasures. He got about 2 inches from my face and introduced himself. I seriously couldn't tell you what the guy's name was. He was about 5 foot tall, overweight, and in his, I would guess, late 50s. As later conversations confirmed, he had a daughter in her 20s. His breath was something that can only be described as rancid, rotting garbage mixed with onions. He literally had the worst breath, and he would get really close to your face. Our first encounter was just your average creeper feeling you get from someone. Maybe that dude at the bar you don't want hitting on you kind of feeling. I honestly thought nothing of it until he started showing up earlier to try and catch me on the sales floor. He would come up behind me and startle me, try to put his hand on my shoulder, grab a box I was stocking, and offer to hold it in front of his crotch while I got the items out. I was very young and stupid back then. I didn't know how to handle creeper men, and honestly had only been hit on by a few guys before this that were creepy, to which I would never see them again. I just figured he was a creeper until one morning he came up and asked me out. Oh boy, here it goes. I have to try and blow this guy off and hope he goes away. He came up to me and said, "I noticed you like to eat at Chinese buffets, as you were there yesterday with your friend. I want to take you there. You seem to like fresh fruit and stir-fry noodles." What the fuck? I never seen this guy at the place, but my friend and I were there for lunch that day before he came in. Was he watching and I didn't see him? He must have been and watched what I ate. The place was pretty empty that day as well. My friend and I always went after the lunch groups as she had anxiety and didn't like to eat in really busy places. I just froze and told him, "No thanks, I've been very busy." I was worried for a bit, but he ended up just leaving me alone that morning. The next day I didn't see him in the store, and then I was off for 2 days. That Friday when I returned to work, sure enough, he was there at 5 a.m. looking through the Hot Wheels. I was running behind and still had boxes to stock. He kept staring at me, and so I ended up calling my friend on the intercom phone to her department and asked for her help. She knew what was going on with this guy, so she came over and stalked down the aisle he was in. My friend gives off this "I'm nuts, don't fuck with me" vibe, and looking back, she was a little off her nut. She would have probably sliced his guts open with a piece of cardboard. I continued working and thought he had left, so I pushed my cart back to the stock room, and just as I was about to turn the corner, he came from around the door and grabbed my arm. I twisted back and told him not to touch me and that he scared me. He said he was sorry and was looking for me. He wanted to know if I'm always off on Wednesday and Thursday, as he came in and I wasn't there. I lied and told him my days off change often. He then says to me that he didn't think that was right because every Thursday afternoon I go to Heb, which is a grocery store, with an older woman in a green car. The guy was stalking me. I did go to the store with my mom on Thursday afternoons. I broke away from this guy in the conversation. The next day he came in, walked right up to me and asked me out to lunch. I told him no, I was too busy, not wanting to date, and walked off. There had been a few small conversations early on with him and my friend about how he liked young girls to dance close to him, etc. In general, he was creepy, and we figured he was a pervert. My friend gave him the nickname Rat Man. One morning after work around 10 a.m., I was getting ready for bed when my phone rang. This was long before everyone had a cell phone. I was about to cover up and drift off. I ended up getting out of bed and answering the phone. The voice on the other end shook me to my core. It was Rat Man. "Hey, Sally, I hope I didn't wake you. I want to know if you'll go with me to the movies tonight." I yelled at him, "How the hell did you get my number?" He ends up telling me that my friend gave it to him and that she said I secretly was interested in him and too shy to tell him. I know my friend wouldn't do this. I hung up on him and the next night asked my friend. She was upset and said no, she would never do that. At the time, my boss was sitting with us at the lunch table. He overheard our conversation and asked what was going on. Come to find out, my boss got a phone call in the store at 9 a.m. yesterday asking for verification for employment and asked if they had my current number on file. This was long before any security measures were put in place, so where you can't just call and ask if so-and-so works there. So, my boss thought I'd applied for a new job and gave this idiot my number. This Rat Man continued to call and harass me. The next week, on my 2 days off, he called at least 30 times and left messages for me on my answering machine, even crying and screaming, asking why I didn't love him, and then calling me back and leaving a message about our trip we were going to take to Mexico, and how he couldn't wait to see me in my new swimsuit he bought me. This guy was mental. There were a few times after that where I would be at our store and once in the mall and would look over and see him across the food court or in the same store I was shopping in, watching. I ended up calling the police, which did no good, and changed my number. He finally stopped coming in the store. My boss said he would escort him out if he did come in, but my boss got a transfer out of state, so this guy would pop in every once in a while. I changed apartments and stopped stocking toys. I've long moved away and still keep in touch with the one friend I met at Walmart. Up until 5 years ago, he was still coming in the store, she says, just older, but still creepy, and had started harassing another young girl who worked there.
2011, the date of the royal wedding. My best friend's family had a party to celebrate. She lives 10 doors down from me in a quiet, secluded street. To set the scene, my town was built as London Overflow. They'd built the estate I live in during the early 60s, basically in the middle of a field. They'd planned to extend the town, but never got planning permission, so it was very isolated and quite desirable. Nothing bad ever really happened here. Ever. It reaches about 9 PM and my other friends decide she wasn't going to stay as originally planned and decided to go home. After ringing her dad and realising he'd had a drink to celebrate the wedding, we decided to walk her home. Her house was about 2 miles from mine, on the outskirts of another estate. Quite a simple walk, over some fields, farmland, etc., and then through a very small wooded area. We walked the land many times. We tell my friend's parents who are hosting the party the situation and we all leave. Everything was fine until I was about halfway up this field. I started to feel like I was being watched. But I'm very paranoid, and I'm only 15 years old at the time, so I totally ignored the situation. Wrong. As we continued, I hear the hum of a car engine and ask my friends if they hear it too, which one replies she does and the other replies to shut up and keep walking. We're now 3/4 over the field and probably under a mile from my friend's house when a pitch black car with windows tinted, black rims, tinted lights comes racing towards us. It had blacked out windows and no lights, so we obviously legged it down a ditch onto the next field before running into the woods. I stop and pant watching the car. I then see 3 males exit the car and start down towards the ditch right at us. They see us jump the ditch and start running in our direction. We book it, get to my friend's house, lock the doors and explain to her intoxicated parents exactly what had just happened. Everyone rationalised that they were probably lost and we were rude. But I'll never shake the look on the passenger's face. Pure aggression. I can never understand why they didn't have their headlights on. It was a dark field and we didn't even notice them until they were basically on top of us. Needless to say, I stayed at my friend's house that night. Never saw those freaks again and never went to the police, although now as I'm an adult I realise that I probably should have.
I'm a petite 24-year-old female from the mainland of the US, but this story takes place when I was 19 and living in Hawaii. Now, the area I lived in was really ghetto, and being half white, half Guamanian, but light-skinned, I was the closest thing to a white person in the entire city I lived in. Whenever I told a local where I lived, they'd give me a funny look, like I was crazy or lying. This is relevant. So because where I lived had absolutely no jobs and I was living with my Hawaiian and ghetto cousins who were all careless, I had to take 2 buses for an hour to work, both ways. The day this happened, I was covering for a coworker who had a family emergency and it was a Sunday. I'd never worked a Sunday before and this shift was also 2 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. No big deal. There was a bus stop right next to my work and they run until midnight, right? Wrong. Buses stop running at 10 p.m. on Sundays. So, here I am, standing in a bus stop alone for about 40 minutes. Businesses all around me are closing. It's getting darker and darker, and I'm starting to panic. I'm completely alone, save for the occasional hooker and John wandering around looking for dark alleys and crystal meth. Hawaii is fucking scary at night. Don't believe the paradise hype outside of Waikiki and North Shore. All of a sudden, some homeless, toothless meth head pops out of nowhere and says, "Hey, the bus no run this late. You fucked. Start walking you skinny ass home." I realize how fucked I am. My neighborhood is seriously dangerous, so even if I did manage to walk home safely, there's no way I'm walking through Cam Park at night alone. It just isn't happening. I open my purse and check my wallet, and find out that one of my cousins has indeed borrowed my last $50, but was nice enough to leave me enough for the bus that isn't coming. Meaning I can't even call a cab. Oh, and my phone is dead, because there was some big shot GM at my work today, so I wasn't allowed to charge it at my cashier station and didn't trust it alone in the break room. As I'm internally having a fucking breakdown, a taxi cab pulls up in front of me, windows down. "Sorry dude, I'd love a ride, but I don't have any cash," I tell the taxi driver. He looks at me, looks around and sighs. "Well, where do you need to go? I can't leave you here now that I know that. I'll end up seeing you on the 5 o'clock news." I tell him my neighborhood and he does a double take, then shrugs and motions for me to get in the back. I'm so happy I ignore the foreboding feeling I have in the back of my mind. I've only been living here for 2 months and my look has been so shitty, being robbed, jumped, tricked into stealing. You name it, it happened, and through such sneaky ways. Then I'm just like, yes, my look is changing. Nah, I was wrong. I hop in the back seat, give him my cross streets kind of near my house, and tell him I'll get his number and pay him later. Thank God I couldn't remember my address. Everything's normal for the first 20 minutes of the ride, then he starts asking me really weird questions. How old are you? Are you a virgin? Are you married? Do you carry a gun in that big purse? I lie and tell him yes about the gun, starting to feel creeped out. He stops talking after that for a bit, until he notices he's almost out of gas. I look. He really is almost out. So we pull up to a gas station, but instead of parking next to a pump, he parks behind the building near a dumpster and says, "I'm going to pay for gas and have a snack, then I'll take you back." I start to say something about needing to get home and he cuts me off. "You're riding for free, let me eat my fucking snack." I'm like, "Oh, okay, and consider bolting when he comes back, but I have no idea where we are or how to get home." So instead, when he leaves, I reach into the front and unlock all the doors, just in case. It was an older model car, so I knew they'd stay unlocked unless he manually locked them again. He comes back, empty-handed. No snack. Fuck. Am I the snack? Fuck. He gets in the front seat, opens the middle console, and pulls out a fucking meth pipe, a baggie of meth, a weed pipe, some weed, and a lighter. "Let me have my snack, then we can go." He packs the meth pipe, takes a few hits, and blows it at me. Then he starts passing it to me. I'm good for right now, thanks. He looks pissed, but puts it down and grabs the weed pipe, repeats the process. I'm like 2 seconds from bolting when he throws the car in reverse and leaves, without pumping any gas, now holding the meth pipe again and taking occasional hits. What the fuck? I'm freaking out. This dude is driving like 70 miles per hour in a 30 lane, high as a fucking kite. But the scenery starts to look familiar. I realize we're like 5 minutes from my house. I look over. Doors are still unlocked. Gotta think fast. His hand is slowly reaching for my knee, and he's looking right at me. Not at the road, and he's moaning like my thigh is giving him the world's best orgasm. We're gonna have fun tonight, baby. I'll teach you how to take a dick. I tell him I'm not interested, and he laughs. Your phone is dead. Who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters? We're in Kalihi, girl. His hand is still on my leg, and he takes a left, away from the street I live on. I realize how fucked I am, but I'm oddly calm. I change tactics. Problem is, if I don't check in, they'll come looking for me. I'm down to party, but I gotta check in first. I'm a little white girl. If I don't come home, they'll go check my work, and my coworkers saw you leave with me. I don't want you to get in trouble. You know how white people are. I'm counting on the fact that he doesn't know my family isn't white. I'm counting on the fact that he's high enough to not know I'm lying. And I'm counting on the fact that he didn't see all my coworkers were gone. He gives me a weird look, then hands me the meth pipe. Okay, girl, let's party. I hold the pipe up to my lips, wait for him to look towards the road, and emulate what I saw him doing, turning it side to side while lighting it. I produce a tiny bit of smoke, don't inhale, and immediately blow it out, hoping to God I don't get fucking high and I never have to explain why there's meth in my system. You're fucking burning it. He gets pissed and grabs the not hot end of the pipe from me, wasting my fucking dinner. I'll show you how to do it right. He takes a hard right and realizes he's headed for the cross streets I told him. My vision is a little fucked. Everything seems too bright and my adrenaline starts to feel almost euphoric. Fuck. Am I high? Fuck. The street I live on is wrapped around a hill, easily a mile wide, and the cross streets I have him are about a quarter mile from my house. As we get close to the cross streets, he slows down, asking me what house it is. I lie and say I can't tell. Can he slow down? It's so dark and I just moved there and all the houses look the same and I'm high. Please slow down. He obliges and slows to about 5 miles an hour and I make a break for it, swinging the door open and jumping out of the still-moving car. I feel like I'm flying as I hit the dirt of the sidewalk and crab walk until I can get to my feet, then I break out in a run. I probably look like a fucking lunatic, arms flailing, but I didn't give a shit, nor did I bother looking back. The oldest cousin I lived with was 39, male, and built like a fucking Samoan. If I could just get to my house, everything would be okay. That was all I could think. Plus, because he'd turned, we'd actually passed my house, so we'd have to drive to the next driveway and turn around because it was a narrow road. And he was at the bottom of a hill, so he wouldn't be able to see which house I was in. I didn't see headlights, so I figured that was a good sign. Finally, I ran into my front yard, unlocked the front door, relocked it, and slid down to the floor, a shaking, crying mess. I went to the front window and peeked out. No one on the street, no cabbie, nothing. I was safe, I thought. I ended up not telling anyone what happened, because I always got the same lecture when something bad happened to me. You were acting like some stupid little college girl. If you were smarter, yada yada yada, but everything seemed okay. I started working day shifts only, avoided being alone or ever at the bus stop, and life went on. About a week later, I noticed a black car with tinted windows parked a few houses down from my house. I figured it was a neighbor's friend and brushed it off, only it was there the next day too. And the next. I finally asked one of my cousins, about 17 years old, if he'd seen it. He said it showed up around 6 every day, which is when I would get home from work. I started freaking out. Finally, I broke down and told my giant cousin what happened, leaving out the meth part. Surprisingly, he didn't lecture me. He felt bad that I couldn't come to him for support and apologized for riding me so hard about being from the mainland and said he'd deal with the black car. The next day, my cousin's son picked me up from the bus stop near the house on his moped. We noticed the black car following us, but acted like we didn't. We pulled up to the house, and as soon as the black car parked, out came my Samoan-built, muscle-bound cousin with a metal baseball bat, taking practice swings as he approached the car. It reversed halfway down the street, hit a fence, jumped a curb, turned around in a front yard, and was never seen again.
I'm a 24-year-old girl, but at the time of this story, I was about 16 and my younger sister was about 14. We were living in a pretty bad neighbourhood, along with my mother, just the three of us, as my 4 older brothers had moved away and my dad passed away 3 years prior. Though the house we lived in was old and kind of in bad shape, we kept it in a very clean/nice condition inside. It had its benefits though. It came with this huge backyard. I'm talking one of them full backyards complete with a garage-sized tool shed. Right at the end of our short metal fence, and on the other side of the fence was a large, unfenced plot of land that also belonged to us. We call it the back 40. Now my mum is not mentally all there. She has the mental and emotional capability of a 15-year-old girl, but she's stunningly beautiful. Few people notice she was also a bleeding heart, meaning basically that she is very trusting and wanted to save the world, while it's also not making very smart choices and putting her tiny 4'11", 90-pound self in danger, as well as me and my sister a lot. One of the people she consistently tried to save was her best friend, Karen. Karen was your typical white trash hardcore, drink a fifth of cheap vodka in the morning type of alcoholic. She'd show up at our place hammered a few times a week, sometimes for money/other things, but sometimes it was to hang out, to steal change off my dresser. You get the idea. Well, one day she shows up with a camper and a borrowed truck, she says. She tells my mum she needs somewhere to keep it because her new husband kicked her out. I immediately think it's bad. It looks like it hasn't been touched since the 1970s. It probably has rats and it's probably stolen, but my mum, the bleeding heart, says it's fine. You can park it behind the shed. I agree, because then it won't be an eyesore at least. Mistake number 1. She parks it in between the metal fence and the back of the shed, so just the very end of it and the hitch are visible from the front of the shed. We all kind of forget it exists for a few months. Then one day our cousin abandons a puppy at our house. It's a pit bull and it takes to us immediately. We love it unconditionally and he loves us back just as hard. We don't even mind that he barks at anyone walking by or any new people in the house. He usually barks, sniffs, then loves him anyway. We begin to feel kind of safe at the house, a feeling that I hadn't had since the last of my brothers left home. A few months later, it's summertime, and my mum is teaching summer school, so my sister and I are home alone. It's about noon and we decide to go sunbathing in our backyard. We toss on our bikinis, grab towels and lay out in the sun, reading, talking, bonding like only a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old can. But I start to feel uneasy. I almost feel as if we're being watched. I don't know why, but I just get the feeling that we should go inside. My sister is a very nervous girl sometimes, prone to crying and breaking down when she's spooked. And I don't really want to alarm her in case it's nothing, so I just tell her I'm hungry and we should go inside. She agrees quickly and I can tell she's rushing as she grabs her stuff. Fuck, she feels it too. Probably she doesn't want to seem like a baby though. We were basically running inside our house. Our kitchen is at the back of the house, with a big window above the sink. We stare out of it. We can see the whole backyard from there. As soon as we're inside, my sister asked if I felt like I was being watched. I said yes. We have a creepy neighbour who is in love with my mum, Karen's ex-husband, who sometimes creeps around the woods next door. My sister says maybe it's him. Normally I'd agree, but I knew he was currently in jail for arson. I started to get freaked out and then, out of nowhere, in the corner of my eye, I see a flash of a man near the old camper behind the fence. It's so far away and he moves so quickly that I didn't get a good look, My sister sees it too and freaks out. Our pit bull is too short to see out the window, so he just sits calmly at our feet. My sister calls his name and, thinking quickly, lets him out the back. He goes bounding out, catching the scent of the intruder. Our view is blocked by the shed, but we lock the back door and crack the window open, and we sit and watch and listen to him barking viciously. Then we hear a man's voice saying something, then more barking, a struggle, then nothing. We can't see what's going on, but we're freaking out. I tell my sister to find the house phone. She runs upstairs to look for it. I run around and lock the front door, double check the windows and snap back to the window and snap the back window shut. I can't see my dog now and I can't hear anything either. My heart is pounding. In this kind of neighbourhood it takes the cops hours to get here. I'm stuck with the memory of calling 911 when my dad collapsed, before I knew he was dead as soon as he hit the floor. A massive heart attack. Telling the operators my dad was dying. It took them an hour to show up. What could some man do to us within an hour? I'm so scared because, above all else, I love my sister. I grab a steak knife from the counter and hide the rest in a drawer. My sister comes bounding down the stairs, already on the phone, telling the operator what's going on. I tell her to go sit in the living room, try to see if the neighbours are outside, maybe flag one. All of a sudden, our dog comes bounding around the side of the shed, happy and calm. I can see the back door from the window and I check to see if it's clear. He reaches the back door and I let him in, slamming the door shut behind him. My sister comes running across to examine if the dog's been hurt. What we see at that moment still makes me nauseous to think about. We look at each other, embarrassed. I don't know what to say. Is that white stuff what I think it is on his face? I threw up in the sink. That answers her question. I lift my forehead from the sink and out the window. I see a man jump the fence towards the back 40, away from us, taking off into the woods. My sister's still on the phone, doesn't mention what we found on my dog's face, out of embarrassment, out of fear, maybe because she was scared to admit what she saw. I don't know. Those are the reasons I didn't mention it to the cops who show up 45 minutes later. I'm assuming her reasons were similar. The cops checked through the woods, but the guy was long gone. They checked the shed, but it had obviously not been entered for years. Finally, they checked the camper. Somebody had been living in there for a while. Clothes, CDs, a CD player, dog toys, food, and other drug-related items were found inside. The dog toys explained how that the guy was able to calm a dog just long enough that he wouldn't mess with him. Police said it was a harmless drifter looking for a place to live and told us to get rid of the camper. And we did, that day. I'd like to say to my mum that she had learnt a lesson, but she didn't. I did.
So, the past 2 stories I've posted here have been about my teenage years, but this story is a little different. Mostly because it comes with some sweet, sweet justice, and because it started just around last Christmas and ended about 2 months ago. Last December, the engine in my piece of shit car started knocking and eventually gave out, as well as the transmission. Seeing as it would be more expensive to fix it than it would be to buy a new car, I scrapped it for a few $100 and put the word out that I was looking to buy a car in the $2,000 to $2,500 range. I was, and still do, work 2 jobs, so I was very quickly tired of having to bum rides to work. This fact led me to ignore a few red flags, but I'll get to that. One of my jobs is a corporate 9 to 5, the other is at an upscale gentleman's club. I put the word out about needing a new car to my coworkers at both places. A month went by and I still hadn't heard anything when a waitress at the club pulled me aside. One of my customers offered me a really good deal on a car, but my parents bought me a brand new Escape, so I don't need it. He wants $1,000 for an 06 Chevy with low mileage. Do you want me to introduce you to him? It seemed like a godsend. I quickly agreed, and she led me over to the back of the bar to a booth where a tall, broad-shouldered older man sat. He looked to be about 60 years old, but he was still pretty huge, even sitting down. He looked like a retired army guy with a small beer gut, but lots of old man muscle. "Mark, this is Dryer Fresh Socks. Dryer Fresh Socks, this is Mark." She introduced us as I sat down next to him. He didn't look at me nor acknowledge me. I got the feeling he was very awkward. My coworker excused herself and left us. I quickly explained that I was looking for a new car. He finally looked at me and began explaining the deal. It was his brother's wife's car. They lived one state over, about 4 hours away. They initially bought the car for their daughter, brand new, but she had a baby a few years later and refused to drive it anymore because it was a 2-door and the baby's car seat didn't fit behind the seat. It had been sitting for years, but now their neighbor, who was a cop, was threatening them, saying that if they didn't put insurance on it or get rid of it, they'd be ticketed. So now, they were looking to unload it as quickly as possible, hence the great deal. I was beyond excited. Mark and I chatted a little longer, albeit awkwardly, and eventually exchanged numbers. Before I went back to work, the subject of art came up and he mentioned he had always wanted to learn how to draw. I got excited, because at the time, I was giving private drawing lessons to make extra money. He seems interested after I show him my portfolio on my phone, and he suggests maybe even knocking the price down a little in exchange for a few lessons. I wrap up our goodbyes and head back to work, and he exits shortly. I'm ecstatic. At 3 a.m., I'm finally back in civilian clothes, waiting inside the front doors for my ride when Mark texts me. "Can you come to my house for the drawing lessons next week?" I politely tell him I don't feel comfortable with that, because he would have to pick me up and I'd be dependent on him to take me home, too. He's a stranger. It just doesn't feel right. "All the more reason for you to get this car. You deserve it." I agree, brushing off the second half of the sentence. He's probably just a little lonely and trying to be nice. We set a date to meet up in a public place so I can check the car out. He plans on paying his niece to make the 4-hour drive the following Tuesday, 5 days from now. I agree. She doesn't mind, because her parents are going to let her keep whatever money I pay for it, and Mark will pay for her gas there and back, plus a tip. I forget about Mark for a day or two, until the texts start. All hours of the day, the most random questions, but all of them pertaining to the car/deal/art, so I don't think into it too much. He's never been married. He claims he has Asperger's, which I find out later is a lie, and that he only has his brother, no one else. I figure he's doing me a favor, so I can answer a few harmless texts. But then I miss a few at work. He spams me, getting progressively madder with each missed text. When I finally respond, I bitch him out, saying he has no right to my time nor attention. He relents, saying he thought something bad had happened to me. That's all. He wasn't getting mad. He was scared. I think back to what he said about having Asperger's, and I think I'm misunderstanding his texts. I feel kinda bad. He stops for a few days, and then Tuesday rolls around. I bring my mom's boyfriend with me to the parking lot. I'm meeting him and his niece in to look at the car. It's beautiful, and I love it. Mom's boyfriend says it's a great deal, and I'd be stupid not to take it. I tell Mark I want it. He spent the whole interaction silent, seemingly intimidated by my mom's 5'1" boyfriend, which is hilarious. The niece drives the car back home. Because the title is in his sister-in-law's name, I have to go to her house 4 hours away to have her sign the title over to me. Mark says he had a doctor's appointment at a hospital about 30 minutes from there, so I can ride down there with him and drive myself home. I agree to the plan. We set the date for next Wednesday. Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., my mom drops me to Mark's house. I assume his appointment is at 9 or 10 a.m. since he wants to leave so early. He tells me it's at 1 p.m. I ask him why the fuck we're leaving so early if the hospital's only 3.5 hours away. He ignores my question, but I get my answer soon enough. This neurotic motherfucker has to stop at every rest stop, every single one. It takes us 6 hours to get to the hospital, almost making us late for his appointment. We park the car and I tell him to ask one of the people where we're supposed to be. It's a huge hospital. I'm not talking to one of those niggers, he basically screams. He's getting frantic and I'm starting to see he's a little, unhinged. But fuck, I'm 3 hours from home and he's already got my $1,000, and I can't back out now. I ask directions and find the elevators to the floor we need to be on, the 8th floor. Mark won't get in. He says he can't do elevators, they'll kill him. Randomly, a mentally handicapped man in the wheelchair next to us repeats the words, "It will kill us." Mark yells, "See? He knows." I'm out of patience. I yank him into the elevator and we finally arrive at his apartment, just on time. I quickly fall asleep in the lobby because he wouldn't let me sleep in the car, knowing I'd worked till 3 a.m. the night before. I awaken to the sound of Mark screaming at the top of his lungs at the poor clerk behind the desk in the lobby. He's calling her every name in the book. Skank, whore, slut, bitch, asshole, fucking cunt. She looks terrified and screams back that she's calling security. I hop up, grab him by the arm, and drag him, literally running, back to the elevator. He opens his mouth to protest, but I tell him to shut the fuck up and get in the elevator. I'm in no mood for this. I refuse to be stranded across state lines because he had to land himself in the slammer for God knows what reason. We exit the elevator just as a team of security guards enter it and rush past him, trying to look normal. We finally get inside and I lose my shit. What the fuck happened? I was waiting for the doctor and I had to use the bathroom. He came to my room while I was gone, so he skipped me to go to the next patient. He wouldn't be back for an hour. What does the fucking receptionist have to do with that? She was in on it. She could have told me he was an asshole. I just stare at him in disbelief. I fully realize I'm dealing with a mentally unstable individual, but I'm locked into this deal, and I'm 30 minutes away from being able to drive the fuck out of here, so I just shake my head and walk back to his car silently. We finally get to his brother's house. The title is signed over to me. All is good, except the port for the car and the charger doesn't work on my phone, and my phone is dead, and I don't know how to get back home. I ask Mark if I can charge my phone in his car for a while. He says yes. I start to follow him home. It's getting really late at this point, and I'm so exhausted I beg him to please skip a few rest stops. He skips 2, then pulls into a rest area. He hops out of the car with a childish grin. "You like what I did there? I skipped 2. Fuck me. I check my phone. 50%. Good enough. I'm so done with this guy. I tell him goodbye and thanks, but I'm gonna take off now. He seems confused. I ignore it and absolutely floor it home. And then texts start. "Zoom, zoom, little girl. Let's see if you find the secret of the wire. You won't make it far, little girl. Zoom. There she goes." I'm creeped the fuck out, but I ignore it, and as soon as the SOS is open, I have registration and insurance on the car. The texts start to get worse. "Tell your pimp you fucked up, little girl, that I have a lot of money. Don't ignore me. You think that car is safe? Silly little girl. You're just a whore junkie. Wait till I go to the cops. You stole that car. You owe me $2,000. I'm talking to your pimp now because you're too stupid to come up with that kind of cash. Bring it to me Monday, or I go to the cops and bust your little sex traffic ring. Variations of this all day until I block his number. I call Mark's brother just in case and tell him what's happening. He couldn't care less. He says to pay him. I said I did, and he asks if I have proof. I said yes. He gave you the money. Why would your wife sign the title over without getting paid? He asks if Mark knows where I live. I say no. He says, good. I start to get texts from a new number, this time claiming to be the cops. I know it's Mark, and I threaten to get a PPO if he doesn't stop. He goes ballistic. Tells me he knows where I live, where my kids go to school, who my pimp is, where I get my drugs. And I know he's lying because I don't have kids, a pimp, or a drug problem, and I'm not a prostitute. I'm still scared shitless, and all I can do is block this number too. I'm always looking over my shoulder, leaving work, and I sleep with a baseball bat. He attempts to get me fired from my job, but he's laughed out and banned. Months go by and I begin to relax. I can still see if he texts me, even though he's blocked. It just goes to a different folder. I check it once in a while. For a few months, he sends completely normal texts, followed by psycho shit when I don't respond. I know you love me, and that's why you're doing this, because your dad is dead so you don't know how to love. It hurts me too. Let's buy your kids some toys. You fucking whore. Zoom. Do you like to ruin men's lives? Stop listening to your meth-head stepbrother. Again, I have no kids. I realize he's just trying to scare me. Legally, the car is mine. He can't take it from me. I finally relax a little. Then, I happen to be awake one day when the mail lady comes. She knocks and tells me I have to sign for something. She hands me a manila envelope with the name Mark Smith as the return address, my full name on it, and the back is stamped with notify sender stamps, like 100 of them, all erratically placed. My heart stops. He knows where I fucking live. And as much as I'm dying to know what the letter says, I don't sign for it and tell her to return to the sender and explain the situation. I realize he probably just looked up my name online and probably found about 5 different addresses, then sent certified mail to all of them in my name in an attempt to verify which one I lived at. I thwarted his plan by not signing. Fuck him. Now, fast forward to 2 months ago. I'm home alone and I get a call from a number I don't know, but it's local, so I pick up. Hi, this is Officer Sanford with the City Fraud Division. Is this Dryer Fresh Socks? Oh no. I say yes. I believe we have a mutual friend here. My heart sinks. I know he means Mark. Am I fucked? Oh, don't worry, I'm on your side. I think this guy's off his rocker. I've been looking into this for a while, and this just doesn't add up to you being guilty of anything but buying a car. Fucking justice. Turns out, Mark walked into a police station to report the car stolen and to report my prostitution ring. He was laughed out, so he wrote letters, lots of them, to the government, to the president, to the sheriff, so a city fraud investigator could get involved. He spoke to the sister-in-law and verified she signed the title over, verified I had registration and insurance, looked into my squeaky clean record, even looked into my schooling and saw a very prestigious university, and he eventually spoke to Mark, face to face, and he knew Mark was fucking crazy, so he had me write a brief account of my side of the story, and advised me to get a restraining order, told Mark to stay away from me, as well as the brother and sister-in-law actually, and close the case. If Mark ever tries to fuck with me again, I've got Officer Sanford's number on speed dial.
I live in a house compound, and one day, me and my family were visiting a friend's house. After a couple of hours, my mum and my mum's friend asked us to go and fetch something from my house. So we go back to my home, which is a long way from his house, and the walk seemed uncomfortable. It was long and it just had this creepy, eerie atmosphere to it for some reason. After ages of walking, we reached my house and we got the thing that we needed, which was inside the house. So I unlocked the door and got the object, and I noticed the bathroom door was lit and exhaust fan was on, which I usually always turned off. But I didn't give that any attention and thought my dad was in the toilet, since he wasn't in my friend's house when we left. So me and my buddy decided to wait outside the house for my dad to finish, and I occasionally went to the small window outside the bathroom and called for my dad, but I didn't get any answer. But I did hear someone humming and singing, so I thought he was just having a good time. After a good hour and a half passed, I started to feel uneasy and told my friend we had to leave because their parents were probably pissed now. When we arrived at his house, we were shocked to see my dad sitting there and talking with my friend's parents. We asked him where you had gone and he said, "I didn't go anywhere, I just stayed here since we first come here." This made me scared because my family was at his for 3 hours and we just waited for my dad. I go to ask my sister the same question and I get the same response. Someone was surely in the bathroom, right? After the visit is done, we go back home, just to find the front door, which I unlocked, and the bathroom door was wide open. My family acted normally, but I was completely freaking out, and it's safe to say that I couldn't sleep that night.
This happened during my final year in college. I took a fun class called theater in LA, which is basically a class where you watch different plays once a week all over Los Angeles. Anyway, since the theaters are all over LA and not everyone had a car, the professor organized a carpool system you could volunteer into. I know what it was like to be carless in LA, so I volunteered to drive someone around. I got partnered with Bob. It started out okay. Well, he really made himself comfortable in my car, changing the music non-stop and going through my glove compartment, snacks, water, etc. without asking me. But whatever. I've met a lot of people with boundary issues before. Things started picking up when he found out we had the same taste in music. We got to talking. I mentioned I had a fake ID. He mentioned he smoked up. I mentioned I wanted to try weed but haven't had the opportunity. Non-American. Only moved to the US for college, too nerdy to get invited to fun shit. So far, so good. Then my mom called, and I had to pick it up since my mom's the type who would keep calling until you picked up. My mom had one of those Bluetooth speakers, so he could hear the entire conversation, but my mom and I were speaking in Indonesian, so I didn't care. At random parts of the conversation, he'd start giggling, and it was making me really self-conscious. Did he think I sounded funny? After I hung up, I asked him, "What's so funny?" He went, "Nothing." Okay, so now we were driving in awkward silence, and then he started making this weird hee-hee noise. It was a cross between a bray, a wheeze, and a giggle. I asked him if he was okay in case he was having an asthma attack or something. He said he was fine. At random parts of the drive, he'd laugh on his own and make that weird hee-hee noise. Shit's getting weird. We finally arrive at the theater, and I quickly talk to other people to get away from him. Then, really loudly, he yelled, "Hey, eraser dust, use your fake ID and buy me some booze." Why the hell are you shouting it out loud? Come on, buy me booze, buy me booze, buy me booze. He started chanting and whining. This girl quickly rescued me by dragging me to the bathroom with her. Apparently, he was harassing her earlier for cocaine. She doesn't do coke or even said anything about coke. He met her for the first time ever, and the first thing he said was, "Hey, do you have coke?" Anyway, the play was over close to midnight, and it was time to go home. Bob went, "Hey, you want to find weed? Drive us around downtown and let's look for weed." No. I'm not driving around in the middle of the night in downtown LA looking for weed with a weirdo. I told him no, and he kept whining and chanting, "Let's get weed, let's get weed, let's get weed," over and over. This was before medical marijuana was legalized, so I kept telling him to shut up and stop yelling that in public. During the car ride back, he kept alternating between whining and chanting, "Let's get weed," and "I want insert random fast food joint he wants me to stop at," and laughing randomly on his own. Thanks to the jam trying to get out of the theater, it was past midnight, so I was exhausted. I was in no mood to eat, even if he were normal. I kept telling him that, and I told him I had plenty of snacks in the car he could keep to himself, which he did, but he wouldn't stop whining and chanting. I ended up tuning it all out, but he never stopped. I was so relieved when I dropped him off. The next day was Saturday, and on Sunday, 3 a.m., I was woken up by a phone call. It was Bob. He had my number since carpool buddies had to share numbers with each other. Eraser dust, eraser dust. I had no idea why he was shouting. There was no noise in the background. "Buy me booze. You have a fake ID. You need to buy me booze." What the fuck? He woke me up for that? I was half asleep and I'm not sure what I said to him, but I'm pretty sure it was along the lines of "fuck off." After that, every single day, I got calls from Bob at random times, including in the middle of the night. Most of them was just asking for booze, fast food, a ride, or whatever, but sometimes he'd be laughing non-stop. He wouldn't say anything, he'd just laugh. He had various different laughs, too. The cartoon villain laugh, the evil scientist laugh, the Mickey Mouse on helium laugh. As I'm typing this, I know it sounds pretty comical, but at the time, I was fucking petrified. The weirdest call I got from him was at 2 a.m., and he went, "Eraser dust. I found a storage container on campus. I'm in it now. Join me." What the hell? He tried asking me where my on-campus apartment is so we could hang out, but obviously I refused to tell him. He actually replied with, "I'll just follow you back next time," which doesn't sound that creepy, but with Bob saying it, I thought he'd be wearing a shawl made of my entrails soon. Obviously, I had to end this arrangement, but I was scared of getting on his bad side since he was giving me mentally unstable vibes. I lied and told him that my very conservative Asian parents are worried about me driving alone at night with a strange man, so they insist on me carpooling with a family friend instead. Out of desperation, I went to the only person in the class I sort of knew and who also had a car, Steve, and explained the situation. Steve is someone I've only met once at a party, but luckily he was awesome and agreed to back up my story and drive me to theaters for the rest of the semester. Luckily for me, Steve happened to be Asian too, so the story seemed believable, because yes, Bob questioned me about it. Steve also happened to be really buff and made sure he always placed himself in between Bob and me, so Bob kinda left me alone after that. I blocked Bob's number, told him I changed my number, and conveniently kept forgetting to give it to him. Bob apparently had a hard time finding another carpool buddy. Everyone found him creepy, and no one lasted more than a ride with him, and eventually stopped coming to the class. I think my professor failed him. I feel bad though, because the guy might have had some untreated mental issues or a drug problem. But still, that dude really scared me.
This is another story that happened in college, during my final year in college. I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment on campus with 4 other girls. My actual roommate, Christine, is a sweetheart, and we're like sisters now. After 10 years of friendship, that was our 3rd year rooming together. We even signed up for the same summer abroad programs. All the other suite/apartment mates were, well, interesting. The other 2 girls sharing our apartment was Chelsea and Brittany. Chelsea was normal, but Brittany was problematic. She would always bring different guys home every night, which was fine, except for the fact that she was in a relationship with a cop who carried a gun everywhere with him and had a serious anger and jealousy issue. The night the incident happened, there was a St. Patrick's Day party with 3 concerts happening in the school, so there were loads of people on campus. Brittany and Chelsea have gone off to party, but Christine and I decided to stay at home to binge on Friday reruns. In the middle of our friend's binge season, we hear someone hammering at our door. "Hey, can you let me in? I need to borrow your phone." It's a male voice. We immediately assume it was one of Brittany's guys. Sometimes they would make up stories just to get into our apartment, then refuse to leave until she comes back so they could hook up. "What should we do?" Christine whispered to me. I knew what she wanted, but she was too nice to say it. So I said it for her. "Let's pretend we're not in and not answer, right?" We were in no good mood to entertain a guy for a few hours while he waited for Brittany to get back. The guy banged on the door and asked to borrow our phone several more times, but eventually he gave up and left. We had fun watching the rest of the episode when our phones buzzed, and it was an automatically generated campus-wide alert text. There was a stabbing in the campus. It was on our very apartment and happened in the unit right above ours. The stabber was an unidentified male. He was still on the loose. I had just looked at Christine in shock and asked her, could it be? She looked unsure but went, "No, it couldn't." Yeah, it couldn't have been. We made sure we barricaded the door shut to our room before we slept that night though, in case Brittany brought Mr. Stabby home. I mean, she doesn't have the best taste in men. The next day, we read the school paper to find out more about the incident. Apparently, the guy knocked on the victim's door asking to borrow her phone. She let him in, and as soon as he was inside the apartment, he grabbed the knife from the kitchen countertop, stabbed her multiple times in the stomach. He was a complete stranger, and it seemed that his only motivation is to stab someone. Since the campus was filled with thousands of people during the party, the guy easily slipped into the crowd and disappeared. Our apartment was on the ground floor and right next to the stairs. If someone was going to knock on every apartment, ours would most likely be right before the victim's apartment. Christine and I definitely spent a few minutes shouting, "Holy shit! Holy shit! Oh my god!" and other things like that. Turns out having a shitty apartment mate may have actually saved us. Yes, there was an article on this in the news. Here's a detail that isn't in the article. The apartment was Levy 6. If you're a fellow Lion during that time, you'd remember that it was a month after there was a shooting over a high school basketball game hosted on campus. Fortunately for me, I was graduating in 2 months, so my mum couldn't pull me out of LA and make me move back to Indonesia ASAP. Yes, my mum received the alert too, knew our apartment's layout, and so she also pieced everything together and realised that it could have easily been me or Christine.
Have you ever been out at a bar and had a cute guy start buying you drinks? It's flattering to say the least, until you lose consciousness. I'm a female, and at the time this all happened, I was just 17 years old. I had just graduated from high school and was working full-time to save money to put myself through college. I had moved into an apartment with a girl named Kate who I knew from work. Kate was a little older than I, and I felt relieved to be sharing a place with someone I not only knew, but also admired. Kate was pretty, smart, and also popular. She had a group of friends that were all around her age, but they all seemed to welcome and accept me, even though I was technically still a teenager to them. It was Kate's 25th birthday. She had planned to have her birthday party at a bar a few towns over. Her family had been longtime friends with the owner, and she actually called him Uncle Tim. Uncle Tim invited her to have her birthday party there, on the house, as a gift to her. Kate wanted me there, but I was still a minor. She spoke to Uncle Tim, and he agreed that I could attend under strict conditions. 1. I would only be allowed 1 beer to celebrate Kate's birthday. 2. I would only be allowed non-alcoholic drinks after that. 3. Someone had to be responsible for me. 4. No one outside the party was to know my real age. And 5. I had to stay in the private party room, out of sight of the other patrons. Kate and I talked our other friend from work, Connie, into being the designated babysitter, for lack of a better term. After the details were hammered out, Connie, along with her boyfriend Mark, agreed to be responsible for me, and I was allowed to attend Kate's birthday party at the bar. I couldn't believe I was going to be partying with this older crowd, at a bar. How cool was that? Well, looking back, I was young and dumb, and it had seemed like the coolness fairies had just shit an assload of awesomeness all over me. Yeah, I was pretty excited, especially when Kate did my hair, makeup, and picked some of her clothing for me to wear. I actually didn't look like a teenager when she was done with me. It's scary what makeup and a pair of spiked heels can do. I was sitting at the table having a blast with my friends from work, and with Kate's friends as well. I had already drunk my beer and was having virgin cocktails at this point. From where the private party room was, you could only see the very end of the bar through the doorway. I had noticed a guy sitting at the counter watching me for some time. He was cute, seemed tall, and looked like a football player in build. He looked like he could have been in his early 20s. My friends were up dancing, ordering more drinks, picking songs on the jukebox, and for a few moments, I was left alone at the table. That's when this guy made his approach. We'll call him Johnny Dickhead because I can't remember his name, and he probably gave a fake name anyway. He came over, sat down next to me, sat a shot glass in front of me, and introduced himself. I asked him what was in the glass. He said it was tequila. He dared me to drink it, making a bet that if I could down it in one go, he'd buy me another drink and answer any 5 questions I wanted to ask. Me being young, dumb, inexperienced, and always up for a challenge, I agreed and downed it. I felt happy and flattered and didn't think a thing about someone hurting me with my friends there, and after all, 20 years ago, times were different. You just felt safer back then. Johnny Dickhead and I got to talking, and he made good on the bet. He left and came back, and another tequila was placed before me. I remember laughing and finding him really attractive. After my 3rd tequila, Connie and Mark had come back to the table to check on me, and being protective, they told the guy I was underage and not to buy me any more drinks. They had just spilled the beans, and I was so embarrassed. Johnny Dickhead acted surprised, then ashamed. He apologized to me and them and started to get up to leave. I stopped him. Biggest mistake ever. I was tipsy and annoyed at this point that my friends were treating me like a child, and I told them so. I asked Johnny Dickhead to sit back down and keep me company, and I told Connie and Mark to fuck off and let me enjoy myself. They went back to the dance floor, but never really took their eyes off of me. Thank fuck for that. Johnny Dickhead proceeded to make bets with me and ordered more shots. What I hadn't paid attention to was the fact that he kept getting up and getting the drinks himself, instead of just having the waitress get them and bring them to the table. He was out of my sight when he went to the other end of the bar. This should have been a red flag, but no, I was naive. The drinks were tequila until the last one I remember drinking. It didn't taste anything like tequila to me. I remember asking Johnny Dickhead what it was, and him replying it was Bacardi 151. Me being young and inexperienced, I had no idea what the different liquors tasted like, so I believed him. It was after this drink where things went dark. I have broken memories of being in a parking lot between 2 cars. Johnny Dickhead was holding me up on one side, and my friend Mark was holding me up on the other. That's all I remember. The next day, I awoke in bed, still dressed, fully hungover and confused about how I had gotten there, and why I'd slept until just past 7 in the evening. My head felt heavy, my thoughts were thick and slow, and even my body felt like it was being weighed down. I felt like the time I had my wisdom teeth removed and they put me under anesthesia, only worse. I was sick for days after that as well. And after I'd woken up, I called Connie and Mark and they came over. They, along with Kate, barged into my bedroom and all sat down around me on my bed. I was then told what really happened, and it scared me shitless. In the 20-odd years since, I have never accepted a drink from a stranger. Ever. The rest of the story I have no memory of, except what I mentioned before about the parking lot. If there are details missing, I'm sorry. I can only relay to you what I was told by my friends. I had fallen off my chair. My friends noticed Johnny Dickhead picking me up off the floor and had rallied around me. They told Johnny Dickhead to go away. When I was passed out, they thought I was just drunk. I'd fallen off my chair 2 more times, and that's when my friends decided to lay me down in a booth to sleep it off while they had one last drink and dance. They thought I was sleeping in the booth, but when they couldn't see me, they came over to make sure I hadn't fallen under the table. I wasn't there. It was at this point they started looking for me, thinking I had stumbled off on my own. When they couldn't find me inside the building, they went outside. And this is where the story gets scary. Johnny Dickhead had taken me. He had his arms around me, dragging me through the parking lot. Mark ran after him, grabbed me, and started trying to pull me away. This is the only flash of memory I have from that night after the last drink. The two of them, one on each arm, then nothing. Connie was screaming at Kate to call the police while Mark was yelling at Johnny to let me go, telling him that I was drunk and underage and that he would go to jail for this. Kate went inside and got the rest of our group and Uncle Tim. Lucky for me, most of them were guys. As Kate was inside getting help, 3 men emerged from a van at the back of the parking lot and each had a knife of some sort. These guys were threatening Mark and telling him to walk away before he got hurt. Kate arrived at this point with all of our friends and Uncle Tim as well as the bouncer. They all circled me, pulled me away from Johnny Dickhead, took me to Kate's car, put me inside, and Connie and Kate drove home. The bouncer and Uncle Tim had baseball bats and there was a standoff in the parking lot. Johnny and those 3 fuckers were outnumbered and decided to jump into their van and get the hell out of there. Mark and the rest of the people in our party called it a night, and Mark drove to my apartment to check on me and pick up Connie. I know you'll ask why the police weren't called, but I was told it was because I was underage and no one wanted to get the bar shut down for allowing me in and allowing me drinks. And because although something really bad could have happened, it was stopped before anyone got hurt. My friends thought I was just hammered drunk, but once they got home, they believed something more sinister had happened. It seems that Johnny Dickhead had slipped something into the last drink. What, we don't know, but it knocked me out for an entire night and day. I'm hesitant to call it a roofied because this was like 20 years ago, so I'm not sure if roofies as we know them today were around back then, but he definitely drugged me. I was shocked and scared to hear all of this. If my friends hadn't been there, I would have been taken away in that van to God only knows where and would have had God only knows what done to me. There's no doubt in my mind that I was going to be gang raped at the very least. And worst, killed and dumped somewhere. I'll always wonder what they intended on using those knives for. The thought still makes me shudder. If you're listening to this, drink responsibly. Don't ever take drinks from strangers, especially drinks that are already poured or opened. Watch out for your friends, and never tell your friends to fuck off, because they might just save your life.
For background, I have worked for a merchandising company that is hired by Kroger for the last 4 or so years on and off. A lot of my family works for this company. My parents are supervisors for employees on my level and have multiple stores that they oversee and everyone loves them. So, at my store, I like to take smoke breaks with other employees and try to make friends. It makes my job easier for Kroger people to like me, so I did my best to come out of my shell. One of these people was an old produce manager. We would talk every couple of days about work stuff and books we liked, while I had no interest in being his friend. Small talk was fine with me. He starts asking me if I like writing and wants to obsessively talk about poetry and love, and I'm starting to get uncomfortable by how often he seeks me out. One day, he asked if I'd critique some poetry he had written. He'd always ask his wife, but as I see, it's not something he can really show her. All I can think is, oh, fucking great. I say I really don't think I'm the person to talk to. I don't have any qualifications, just anything that's nice, but it's still a no because I'm not a confrontational person at all. I was 17 at the time and I've learnt since. Anyway, he shoves multiple straight up nasty pieces of torn up dirty paper into my hands anyway, and struts off at a high speed. In hindsight, like how a little boy would give his first crush a note that says, "Will you go out with me?" with a yes/no, then dash away to avoid the fallout. I kind of already know, but it's like turning away from a car crash. You can't. So I'm standing there in an aisle of Kroger in broad daylight, trying to decipher his terrible kindergarten handwriting. She doesn't know how beautiful she is, how he wants to caress her face, how she doesn't even know what she's worth. A lot about her eyes. So I'm getting chills thinking about the fact that this man in his 60s is spending time off work thinking about me enough to write pages about me. It's the first time in my life that I felt immediately and legitimately in danger. Not because he's interested, but because he was spending this much of his time thinking about me. I've had older men ask me for my number before, and that never bothered me much before because it was a fleeting lapse in their judgment over as soon as I said no. This, however, has been going on for God knows how long. So I went straight home early that day and showed my parents the papers, and I knew they could do something about it. My stepdad was pissed. He was so pissed. I instantly felt safer even though he was still at work the next day, because he never looked me in the eye again. He actively avoided me. I quit that store a few days later, so I don't ever know what happened to that guy, but it still makes me shiver when I remember this. Someone can be thinking about you this way for days, weeks, months, and you could never know it until they literally act on it. I'm just glad Harry chose to write about it instead of doing something worse. I don't dress up for work anymore.
I was walking home from my local job at McDonald's when I decided to boot up Pokemon Go, and as I was playing, I decided to stop by my local church because it is a Pokestop and they have a little rest area for people who like to jog or just hang out. I noticed I was running low on items and decided that I had an hour to kill, so I decided to settle down on one of the steps. About 30 minutes in, I hear a very loud squeak through my headphones and realized an old car had pulled up the backside of the rest area. I thought nothing of it because I assumed that they just pulled over to mooch off the lure, but then I heard the slight click of a car door closing. This is when I started to panic, as local thieves have been more active since Pokemon Go became popular in my area. I hear the slight patter of footsteps cross across the rest area. Me, being the impulsive idiot that I am, looked into my phone as if I was FaceTiming someone and said, almost yelled, "Yeah, Dad, I should have had enough gas money for this week. Let me grab my wallet and check, though," and thrust my hand into my pocket and whipped out my knife and stood up. Turns out the guy didn't realize I was 6'1" and a 220-pound man. At first I felt bad because I thought it was the local priest, telling me that it was time to go home because it was getting late. And then I noticed that he had a brick in his hand that he was going to use to smash my brains in with. To say the least, I was shaken up and I could never figure out why he tried to attack me because a few seconds later my dad saw me and was going to give me a lift the rest of the walk home when he noticed the guy sneaking up on me. After the guy ran, he was surprisingly fast for an older guy. We stayed by his car until the police showed up, and then we went on with our day. So, let's just say I don't want to meet mentally deranged old men who want to smash my head in on a regular basis.
For background, I have worked for a merchandising company that is hired by Kroger for the last 4 or so years on and off. A lot of my family works for this company. My parents are supervisors for employees on my level and have multiple stores that they oversee, and everyone loves them. So, at my store, I like to take smoke breaks with other employees and try to make friends. It makes my job easier for Kroger people to like me, so I did my best to come out of my shell. One of these people was an old produce manager. We would talk every couple of days about work stuff and books we liked, while I had no interest in being his friend. Small talk was fine with me. He starts asking me if I like writing, and wants to obsessively talk about poetry and love, and I'm starting to get uncomfortable by how often he seeks me out. One day, he asked if I'd critique some poetry he had written. He'd always ask his wife, but as I see, it's not something he can really show her. All I can think is, oh, fucking great. I say I really don't think I'm the person to talk to. I don't have any qualifications, just anything that's nice, but it's still a no because I'm not a confrontational person at all. I was 17 at the time and I've learnt since. Anyway, he shoves multiple straight up nasty pieces of torn up dirty paper into my hands anyway, and struts off at a high speed. In hindsight, like how a little boy would give his first crush a note that says, "Will you go out with me?" with a yes/no, then dash away to avoid the fallout. I kind of already know, but it's like turning away from a car crash. You can't. So I'm standing there in an aisle of Kroger in broad daylight trying to decipher his terrible kindergarten handwriting. She doesn't know how beautiful she is, how he wants to caress her face, how she doesn't even know what she's worth. A lot about her eyes. So I'm getting chills thinking about the fact that this man in his 60s is spending time off work thinking about me enough to write pages about me. It's the first time in my life that I felt immediately and legitimately in danger. Not because he's interested, but because he was spending this much of his time thinking about me. I've had older men ask me for my number before, and that never bothered me much before because it was a fleeting lapse in their judgment over as soon as I said no. This, however, has been going on for God knows how long. So I went straight home early that day and showed my parents the papers, and I knew they could do something about it. My stepdad was pissed. He was so pissed. I instantly felt safer even though he was still at work the next day, because he never looked me in the eye again. He actively avoided me. I quit that store a few days later, so I don't ever know what happened to that guy, but it still makes me shiver when I remember this. Someone can be thinking about you this way for days, weeks, months, and you could never know it until they literally act on it. I'm just glad Harry chose to write about it instead of doing something worse. I don't dress up for work anymore.
This happened to my friend and I when we were both 14. We're 27 now. It was during summer break and her parents had left us alone for the weekend while they went on a little vacation. She lives in the suburbs, but her house is pretty close to busy streets and a major highway, so there are normally a lot of people around. But not at 3 a.m. when this all happened. We decided that the copious amounts of junk food had not been satisfying enough, and we really wanted donuts. The closest Tim Hortons, open 24 hours, was about a 30-minute walk away, so we left at about 2:30 a.m. and made our way up the busy highway. It's well lit and has numerous shops and gas stations, but we've had problems with weirdos there before, although that was all during the day. We get our donuts and make it halfway home when I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. We were standing next to one of the closed gas stations where we noticed a rapey, white, windowless van parked in the shadows. I stopped my friend and asked if she heard anything, and just as she confirmed the sound, a fat, naked man came waddling out from behind the back of the van, holding his dick in his hand and really going to town. My first instinct was to laugh, which my friend and I both did because this nasty man looked absolutely ridiculous. We kept walking and laughing down the road when we heard quick footsteps. We turned around and this weirdo was running after us with his hand still on his dick. He was yelling, "Pretty girls like you should join me for beers," and "You're making my dick harder," as he ran after us. We stopped laughing and ran across the 4-lane highway to the other side when a car had come down the road. He was about to cross and continue chasing after us when the oncoming car stopped him. The car didn't seem to know what was happening, didn't see it, or didn't care, so they kept traveling and we were alone with the weirdo once more. I whispered to my friend to pick up some gravel that was next to the sidewalk and to throw it at the man. We did. We hit him and he attempted to cross the road, but we kept throwing rocks at him that he seemed confused about the situation and covered his face with both hands to protect himself. It was at this point that my friend and I ran like never before, and when we turned around he wasn't following us and was no longer visible. I went home the next day and accompanied my mother to the grocery store. We drove by the gas station where the weirdo was parked, but the van was gone.
This is a true story about one of my most terrifying experiences I ever had in my life. It was most especially disturbing considering my age at the time of this encounter with someone who was the most likely a paedophile with bad intentions. I'm from Canada and generally feel very safe where I live. However, I live less than 15 minutes away from the home of two of the most notorious serial killers in Canadian history, Robert Pickton and Clifford Olson. Knowing that, it's safe to say that there is a history of crime where I live. Just because those two horrible people were put in jail before this happened doesn't mean evil doesn't exist, as I learnt, so here is how it all happened. After leaving my friend's house in the winter time around 10 o'clock at night, I slowly made my way home, walking through the dark empty streets of our peaceful neighbourhood. Her parents weren't very responsible and were drunk too, so they couldn't drive me home, but to be honest, I wanted to walk because I didn't want to go home right away. My parents trusted me and never would have thought that I could be in danger. I just turned 11 and was wearing little pink sneakers, my brother's hoodie, my blonde hair in braids. I walked calmly and proudly, dragging my brother's scooter behind me. I told myself that there wasn't anything to be afraid of. I didn't look it, but I was a pretty fearless child. I thought that I was tough back then. Since I wasn't in any rush to get home and be told by my mother I was going to bed, I paused and admired the silence. I took a deep breath, inhaling the air, exhaling and creating fog with my breath. After a while, I picked up the pace and continued towards my street. Through the fog, I could almost see where I had to turn onto my street. The peaceful moment was suddenly disturbed by the sound of a pickup truck driving past me, definitely above the speed limit. About a minute later, the peaceful moment was suddenly disturbed by the sound of a pickup truck driving past me, definitely going above the speed limit. About a minute later, I heard a slow-moving vehicle engine behind me, but I didn't think anything of it at first. That was until I turned around. Strangely, there was the same red pickup truck that had drove past me a few minutes ago. It would have had to have gone all the way round the block to end up behind me so quickly again. Uncomfortably, I grabbed my brother's scooter tightly and put one of my feet on it as I dragged the other. I didn't want to draw any attention to myself, so I didn't get on it straight away. I felt the truck getting closer, approaching me from behind. Then my stomach began to hurt and I started getting chills. I had this intense gut feeling that I needed to get away from this man who was lurking behind me in his truck as fast as possible. I didn't look behind me again. I jumped on the scooter and raced onto my street, my feet slapping the ground as I launched myself. As the wheels slipped a little bit on the frosty pavement while I rode off, I panicked, screaming a little bit every time the scooter wobbled. I picked up quite a bit of speed, my eyes watering from the freezing cold wind as it blew furiously in my face. My stomach lurched when I heard the car engine roar. He stepped on the gas and sped towards me. The fear that he was following me had now been confirmed. Tears fell from my eyes as I flew down the street like a bullet. Luckily, I could see my house. Slightly relieved, I prepared to jump off and sprint inside. I looked over to see him right beside me, staring. It was difficult to see what he looked like, other than that he had a beard and was wearing a white hat. But I will never, never forget his eyes. They stared at me in the most horrifying way. I turned around, I couldn't look at him. It was just unbearable. Now, I slammed on the brakes, skidding on the icy roads as I was thrown off my scooter. I frantically tossed it on the front yard and bolted. I let out a gigantic scream as I sprinted up to my front door. Thankfully, it was unlocked, so I ran inside and slammed the door behind me, locking it immediately. Screaming for my parents, I ran down to them so fast that I practically fell down the stairs. I tried to tell them everything that happened, but I was breathing so heavily they could barely understand me. Finally, they figured out what was happening and went upstairs with me. When they looked out the window, the red pickup truck was still in front of the house. My parents angrily went outside to confront the driver, but as soon as he saw them, he sped off even faster than he did when he was chasing me. I wondered why he was still there 3 minutes later. Was he waiting for me to come back? Because why would I? Was he writing down my address? I don't know. I probably don't want to know. Someone who is messed up enough to follow a screaming and obviously uncomfortable 11-year-old girl home clearly wasn't there to check if I got home safe. I'm happy to say that I never saw that creepy red pickup truck ever again. But this terrifying encounter sure kept me awake at night, wondering what would have happened if I wasn't fast enough. My bedroom faced the same street where I fell off my scooter trying to get away from him. I always worried from that day on that he would come back and would try to get inside my room. So, to the twisted, horrible man who chased me in his car following me home, let's not meet ever.
This happened last semester when I was finishing 10th grade. I'm a teenage girl with almost no enemies, which makes this story even weirder. I'm still a little nervous to tell this story because of the person it involves, but I'll just hope for the sake of my life that it doesn't get back to them. So, this all began in my science class on the very first day when my teacher created the seating plan. Unfortunately, this was one of those teachers that didn't want you sitting with your friends. He believed that this was a good way to get us to meet new people, but trust me when I say that there are some people who I don't want to meet. My teacher sat me with a boy who I'd never seen before named Al. Right away, I kinda got a weird vibe from him, so I tried to focus on my worksheet to avoid conversation. Yeah, I know, this sounds a bit rude, but it was a quiet class anyways, so not introducing yourself wasn't really out of the ordinary. He was the type of person who didn't really have many social skills, and he seemed very awkward. He didn't appear to take very good care of himself either, and even though I was at least a foot or two away from him, I could smell his disgustingly bad breath. Apparently, we weren't the only people that didn't want to introduce ourselves because an awkward silence filled the entire room. My teacher noticed this and stood up in front of the class. I know it may feel weird sitting beside a stranger, but it'll be a lot better if you get to know each other. I want you to turn to the person I have you seated with, shake their hand, and tell them your name. Great, now I had to talk to this guy. We introduced ourselves and then we shook hands. His hands were extremely sweaty, and the way he lingered during the handshake creeped me out. Most people's conversations ended there and then they went back to work, and that's what I was hoping for too. But of course, that's not what happened. For about a minute things were quiet, but the entire time he was staring at me. I looked over at him after a while because it was a bit strange how he was staring, and I wanted him to stop. Before I could ask what he was doing, he started talking to me. "What kind of music do you like?" he asked awkwardly. I told him what I listened to, and then I returned the question because I didn't want to seem rude. Then he says, in the most monotone and serious voice ever, "I fucking love Nicki Minaj. I love everything about her. She's the most beautiful woman ever." At first I chuckled a bit because I thought maybe he was joking, but then I realized he was completely serious. I was surprised because he didn't really seem like he would like her music, but apparently he had even been to her concert. He later told me that he didn't even really like her music that much, he just liked her body. I didn't really care that much, and this wasn't the creepy part, but it does add to the story, especially later, so I'm including it. He started telling me about his other classes, but he focused so much on his Spanish class. I asked him why he liked Spanish so much, and he stared me directly in the eye. Miss Johnson is the hottest teacher I've ever seen. I love her so fucking much. I didn't really know how to answer that, so I just said, "Oh, cool, I heard she's nice." He said in the creepiest way possible, "Yeah, and she's thick. I like 'em thick." I thought this was really weird, but this guy didn't seem like someone whose bad side you'd want to get on, so all I said was, "Yeah, there are some pretty good teachers at this school." I didn't think there was anything wrong with what I'd said, but I definitely didn't expect the reaction that I would get. Suddenly, he had some weird outburst. "Fuck no, I fucking hate Mr. Jones. He's a piece of shit," he said angrily. I had no idea what I said would provoke him like that. The teacher who he was talking about was one of the most well-liked teachers in our school. I didn't know anyone who didn't like him. Apparently, he taught Al for English last semester, and clearly, things didn't go very well. I didn't ask him why he hated him so much, and I figured it might just be best to play along in this situation before this kid started a scene. I just said, "Yeah, he's my drama teacher and he doesn't seem that great," even though I was totally lying because I knew what a good teacher he was. Once again, this gets 100 times creepier as the story continues, and I'll explain why. This kid talked to me almost the entire class. I was barely even talking back to him, and I was giving him one-word answers for most of the questions that he was asking me, yet he wouldn't stop talking to me. It was honestly really annoying, but he was intimidating, so I didn't do anything about it. I just wanted him to shut up so I could do my work. As the days went by, I realized just how weird this guy was. He told me all about his problems as if I were his therapist, but he didn't say a single word to anyone else in the class. I think he knew I was the only one who wouldn't call him out for being such a creep because I was scared of him, and I had to sit beside him for the rest of the year. I dreaded science every single day because I hated listening to him. I never got any work done. He would tell me the most personal and disgusting things about himself. He told me about how he had a foot fungus on his toe and even pulled out his phone to show me pictures. I was really grossed out, but I didn't want to make him mad, so I just went along with it. After a few days, he brought up Mr. Jones again, that teacher who he hates. I've never heard someone more angry in my life. You know, I planned on killing him, right? I want him dead, and I wasn't afraid to do it. The only thing stopping me was the law. Maybe one day, I'll find a way around it. He said this with a terrifying blank stare in the most serious way a person could speak. I was really concerned, but all I said was, "Well, you don't want to risk going to jail." I really wanted to tell a teacher or a counselor because something seemed extremely off in his head, and I don't doubt that he would actually do it. The thing was, if he got in trouble for making threats like that, then he would know that it was me who told on him. If I got in any trouble, I knew that he'd be coming for me. It would be easier for him to kill me than that teacher anyways. I told my friends about it, and it turns out one of my friends knew him. She said that he was a complete nutcase, and that if he made a threat like that again, I should probably tell a teacher. She agreed that he wasn't even slightly joking when he said that. For the rest of the semester, he would ask me creepy questions and would randomly swear under his breath. One time he asked me what my stripper name would be if I was a stripper. I've never talked to him about anything like that, so it was really creepy and random that he would even ask that. I was genuinely afraid of him, and I really wanted him to like me because I was so afraid of being on his bad side. He was very violent and talked about revenge a lot, and he had such a short fuse. One day, we had to be lab partners, and for the lab we were doing, we needed a source of gas. I turned on the gas so we could use it, and he started swearing and yelling at me. He called me stupid and said I was wasting gas. I knew I wasn't wasting gas, and he was being ridiculous, but I just told him I was sorry and asked if he wanted to be in charge of the gas instead, because I didn't want the teacher to think I was causing problems. There was another incident where we were learning about the carbon cycle and how cows contribute to it. My teacher was trying to be funny, and he said something like, "Whenever I drive past a farm, I always make sure to plug my nose so I don't smell the cow poop." Then, out of nowhere, Al loudly blurts out to the entire class, I inhale deeply and say, "Mmm." The whole class except for me and him burst out laughing. I didn't laugh because I knew he was probably serious, and he didn't laugh because he was definitely serious. For the next hour of our class, he told me about his poop fetish. Yes, you heard correctly, his fucking poop fetish. You have no idea how hard it was to keep a straight face while he was telling me this. He said there was nothing that he loved more than the smell of poop, and he even ate some horse poop one time. This was really hard to listen to. It began to get unbearable when he started telling me how he didn't even use toilet paper sometimes because he liked playing with his own poop, and how he would purposely touch other people's stuff afterwards because it turned him on knowing that other people came into contact with his poop. After about an hour of listening to him talk about shit, I was getting really annoyed and grossed out. I started being a little bit rude, and I sarcastically said, "Cool," at the end of his disgusting story. I soon realized that this was a big mistake. He became really angry at me and started yelling at me. My classmates were now staring and wondering what I did to get yelled at. It was pretty embarrassing, so I tried to calm him down before he made an even bigger scene. I lied and said I wasn't being sarcastic, and that I actually did think it was cool. It took about 3 minutes of me apologizing and convincing him before he finally calmed down. Sadly, I had to keep listening to his creepy and annoying remarks, but trust me when I say they got even creepier. One day, he walked into class late and extremely pissed off. After the teacher's lesson was over, he started ranting to me like a maniac. "I hate everybody in this stupid fucking school. I wish I could come in here with a gun and just shoot everyone and then myself afterwards. I don't even care anymore," he said with his piercing eyes staring directly at me. I was so scared, because nobody in the right mind says that to someone who they barely know. I wanted to tell somebody, badly, but there was no way I could prove what he said. I didn't want him to find out that I got him in trouble, so I didn't tell anyone except a few close friends. I tried to convince him otherwise, and that hurting anyone in our school would be a horrible idea, but that just resulted in him getting mad at me. I worry that if one more teacher makes him mad, he really will act on his threat and bring a gun to school. He definitely fits the profile of a school shooter. Socially awkward, loner, lack of compassion, poor judgment, and not caring about the consequences of his actions. Every day, I'm worried that he might pull a gun from his creepy oversized bag that he carries around. Luckily, it's now summertime and I'm out of school for a while, so I don't have to see that psycho until September. I'm glad that he didn't shoot anyone, although he did harass and scare people in other ways. There's too many incidents to remember, but I'll name a few. That Spanish teacher who I mentioned he was showing interest in earlier was obviously annoyed by his behavior in her class. I wasn't there to see what happened, but he told me that he was planning to take another course she teaches just so he could be in her class. My guess is that he made inappropriate comments to her during Spanish, and she found out that he was planning on taking her other class because my friend saw him and the Spanish teacher in the counselor's office. I was told by Al that he was no longer able to take that class. I can only assume that the Spanish teacher didn't allow him to take it because of his creepy behavior, and that's what they were discussing with the counselors. Another time, he called over the class peer tutor who was a male and 1 year older than us. He asked us for help on a question, but he still wasn't able to understand even after the peer tutor explained, so he got very angry at him. He called him almost every swear word I can think of and told him that if he brought his white ass anywhere near him again, he'd get the shit kicked out of him. A few days later, he called the peer tutor over again, and I thought maybe he would apologize, but nope. He looked the peer tutor dead in the face and said in his usual creepy monotone voice, "Want to get milked?" The peer tutor was really creeped out, and luckily he just left. After he left, Al stared at me and said, "I like fucking with him, you know? One day I'ma milk his ass like a cow." He's seriously the creepiest person I've ever met. Sorry this story is a little disorganized. It was really hard to organize all the weird things that happened with this guy, but I hope it was entertaining. I had to leave a few incidents out because there's no way I'd be able to tell you about every single one. But anyways, now that you know how I unwillingly became the therapist of some weird psychopath who might shoot up our school one day, I hope I don't have any classes with him ever again because I don't think I could handle it. Hopefully, he gets some help, but I really hope that I never have to talk to him and his bad breath, toe fungus, shit fetish, Nicki Minaj obsessed ass ever again. Al, find a real therapist, because you need one.
This story is from the earlier years in my childhood. Between the ages of 9 and 11, I lived in town, and while I missed living on acreage, it was really great because my sister and I lived within walking distance of 2 playgrounds, next door to my brothers and down the street from another pair of sisters who all played at the same playground. Being the oldest by at least 4 years, I was often tasked with fetching them, or if I was bored, as I didn't have any other friends at that time, I'd end up playing with the small group. Now, I will quickly also mention that our driveway was bordered by a large white picket fence that belonged to the house next to us. There were also 2 Rottweiler pit bull crosses that would bark loudly at whoever was on the other side of the fence. Our neighbours were, at first, I thought, quiet, who didn't like talking to kids, but back then it was also a little more obvious that I had autism. Thus, I also thought they were worried about upsetting me, as some people are. I couldn't have been more wrong. Our first bad encounter was when we were coming home and pulled into our driveway. I had just attended my first day of soccer and was getting out on the side where the fence was. One of the dogs lunged and started to bark. I remember screaming and I started to cry as this hurt my ears. I wasn't really terrified of dogs, and the guy who was in the back and smoking asked my mother to control her retarded daughter. This really ticked her off, and she told him to control his out-of-control dogs before entering the house. The man of the house I never really saw, but when I did, I instantly didn't like him. He was tall, bony, with long stringy hair and a beard. His girlfriend, I think it was, had those red press-on nails and was always chewing gum. Our neighbours didn't like me for whatever personal reason, I don't know, but they always called me a retard when they saw me. I could just go past on my bike and be riding by and I'd hear, "Go back inside, retard." Yes, those were our neighbours. We still are Christian, but my parents didn't appreciate them one bit. I still didn't understand why they're insulting me. I didn't know what retard meant until later, so I just ignored them. Things slowly escalated as our lawn ornaments were stolen, rocks were thrown at our truck in the middle of the night, and loud honking that would wake me up at 2 AM. These guys once had a party and some drunken person tried to enter our house. I wish I could say this was all what happened, but this is a scary part. We owned a dog ourselves, a golden retriever black lab mix named Mandy. Mandy is a sweetheart and is very nice to people and seems a bit stupid to us at times. She's still with us and I love her because she's brilliant in her own way and likes me. I used to take her for walks almost every day back then when I felt safe. The small group of us had been walking home but decided to split up and go to different houses for lunch. So, while the brothers went with the sisters to their house, I cut down the alleyway that would lead to our fenced-in backyard. We were no more than 2 houses away when we heard loud barking from one of the Rottweiler pit bulls. We weren't bothered and just kept a tighter leash on Mandy because she started to yank towards the source of the noise. Suddenly, the fence gave and the neighbour's dog was out and coming right towards us. Mandy wrenched herself free just then and lunged at the dog, and the two got into a horrible fight. We ran, screaming for our dad, and he told us to go and wait inside. I learned this later, that when we got there, our neighbour was in the back porch, watching. We didn't notice him before, We still don't know how long he was out there, just that he was just watching the dogs fight while my dad, the hero he is, tore them apart and kicked the offending dog, who ran back into the yard. Mandy had to go to the vet for stitches, and to this day, she's missing fur on the muzzle where the dog attacked her. I still remembered what I overheard him saying. "They're attacking dogs, man. Your girls, that mutt, were trespassing, so they had every right to attack them." Now please, bear in mind that we were in the alleyway, that's public property. My dad threatened to call the police and have his dogs put down, and that got him to fix the fence. To this day, I still wonder if he had intentionally been out there and watching his dog the entire time. I'll never know, as his girlfriend was arrested for possessing cocaine, and he gave the dogs to an animal shelter and put the house up for sale before moving out. I don't live in that town anymore, nor have any contact with other neighbours, so I don't know what come of them, but either way, psycho neighbours with too many screws loose, let's never meet again.
Hey all, joined Reddit just for this. First post, yada yada. Here's the first of my 2 creepiest LNM encounters. This happened a few years ago when I was 23-ish, 5'7" female, kinda skinny if that matters. I was working at this little bakery in my hometown. Paid okay, lovely clientele. So, there was a coffee shop in the same shopping center. The center was L-shaped, the cafe in the foot of the L, the bakery towards the middle of the long part. I knew the 2 girls who worked in the cafe, super sweet. The bakery also served tea, and the cafe had sandwiches, so we referred customers to each other all the time. On the day in question, I pulled into the parking lot and noticed the cafe was dark. Weird, as the cafe opened way earlier than the bakery and the owner was a total stickler for attendance. There was also a dark, expensive-looking car parked in front, probably one of their loyal customers, just as curious about them being closed as me. I shrugged it off and set to opening the bakery. So, I'm going through the morning's preparations, and not 10 minutes after I flip the open sign, the doorbell tinkles. This guy with a dark, kinda messy hairdo walked in. He was dressed sort of business casual. He had on a black shirt and pants, but a vivid green tie. Smelled like Patrick Bateman. He walks up to the counter and I try to smile like my spidey sense wasn't tingling. The guy was just off, even the way he walked up, like only the counter was stopping him from walking right into me. I gave him the standard bakery greeting. "So, what'll you have?" He said, "I bet you'd like to show me those tits." I couldn't manage anything better than, "Excuse me?" He nods and launches into the tirade of the filthiest bullshit I've ever heard in one place, telling me to show my tits, saying I had fat tits, and even more vile shit I'm still trying to block out. My mind is in fragments. It's literally the last thing I'd expected to hear that morning. I somehow managed to get out that he wasn't allowed to speak like that, and I would have to get my manager. The guy started mocking me like a grade schooler, doing a whiny imitation of my voice and throwing my words back at me. I threaten with the cops. He laughs. All this time, I'm trying to put as much distance between myself and the guy as I can, scared he's going to grab me across the counter. We didn't really have a back room per se, more like a little alcove with a phone in a filing cabinet. My phone was still beneath the counter and I sure as hell wasn't going back for it. I picked up the landline receiver and hit 9. Suddenly the guy's voice drops. He says, "You don't put that down right this second, I'm coming over there." My hand freezes. My finger doesn't. By the time I hit 1, he dashes out of the door and hops in the expensive car, fucker parked in an angle so I couldn't see the plates from the bakery, and he peels out of there. I manage not to dissolve into tears as I describe the situation to the operator. She agrees to send a squad car. I hang up and dial my manager, who's super supportive and gets there before the cops do. As a small, poor bakery, we only have fake security cams as a deterrent, so they only have my description of the guy to go on. As they take my statement, I remark that, gee, it was weird that the cafe wasn't open when I got there. Could we check in with them? The girls? were terrified. Turns out that my close encounter of the creep kind was an everyday nightmare for them. The guy had been going there for months, saying the creepiest, most violently sexual shit to those poor sweet girls. In a fit of desperation, they had locked the door and shut off the lights when they saw him drive up that morning, praying he would go away. They hadn't reported it because they were afraid of what would happen. One girl was under 18, the other was kind of a recent immigrant, so they didn't feel like making waves, and they thought it would be blamed on them. The owner of the cafe was this Russian woman who hated everyone younger and prettier than her, so no support on that front. In the end, I don't think anything came of it. It took a long time for me to be comfortable at work again, and the girls quit not long after the incident. So, creepy barista harasser, let's not meet, unless you want me to go all mama bear on your ass for what you did to my girls.
So, to set the stage, I'm dicking around trying to figure out what I want to do in my life. My uncle has this shitty little one-bedroom house that he lets me stay in for basically a pittance in rent. Me and my shitty little retail job has never heard anything better. So I move in. Literally, the first 10 minutes I'm here, creep number 2 pops out of his house, one over across from mine. Think Mr. Heckles from Friends, but tan and bald on top. And I guess an unaccompanied female was just too much for this guy to resist. He started talking before he was all the way across the street. Just this constant stream of talk that kind of runs into itself. I think he was talking about people that lived in the neighbourhood before. Anyway, he goes off on this long rant about how people who lived in the house before me bred pit bulls and let them tear up the lawn, and how he worked with the company to help him reseed the yard. I managed to not laugh as I tell him the owner, my uncle, has been the previous tenant, who owned one beagle, and that the lawn had never been torn up. I was kind of curious to how he'd react. The guy just blinked and gave this weird little sideways head shake and went off on another tangent. That would become all too familiar for me in the coming months. This guy would never admit to a lie. Just start off on another one. Anyway, at that point, my crew showed up and we did some righteous moving. I noticed that Heckles popped back into his house as soon as the males showed up, something that will become very familiar to me in the coming months. Heckles would never knock on my door to see if I was in. He would stand at my front window with his face right up against the glass and his hands around his face. Creepy. Anytime I was out and unaccompanied, he would whip out of his house and come over to me, talking constantly. It was more annoying than scary at this point. The dude just had an idea that I was this young, naive girl that needed his advice. Problem was, I wasn't. And what's more, his advice was always wrong. He would always tell me things like refrigerator bulbs couldn't be replaced. So he would help me remove the back paneling on my refrigerator and swap it out. Or he would tell me to do flat out illegal things like pour motor oil down the drain. Well, about this time I got together with my on-again, off-again guy friend. That's when it took a turn for the creepy. The dude turned from advice to complaints. He'd show up at 9 at night complaining my dog was barking. I'd be like, what the fuck? What dog? And I started finding all these little things amiss around the house. My outside faucet would be on when I went out in the morning. My mail would accidentally wind up at his place, even though it had not appeared to have ever happened before. Once I nearly shit myself when I came home from work and found the front door unlocked. Nothing was missing though. But all my cushions were rearranged and there was a glass in my dish drainer that wasn't there when I left. When I was outside with a man, even if it was one of my relatives, Heckles would sit on his porch and glare. The last straw was when he slashed my tyre. I had no idea what set this tantrum off. I guess it was because my boyfriend spent the night. When I stepped out for work the next morning, I noticed my truck was at a distinct angle. Before I even got all the way to the truck, Heckles was out of his house and legging it fast over to my house. He was trying to tell me about the girl he knew who had her tyres slashed in the exact same way. That's about all I could extract from it. I was at the end of my patience and was like, "Fucker, I know it was you." He blinked and did a head shake and started off, telling me how he was going to change the tyre. I yelled at him. At this point, I was fucking frantic. I knew how to change the tyre on my own goddamn car. Well, my boyfriend heard the yelling and come out, so Heckles scurried away to his burrow. I called my uncle after letting work know why I had to miss a day, because I wanted out of that place. My uncle told me to hang on and that no less than an hour later, he would be over with his tallest son. My uncle wanted to talk to the guy directly and get him off my back. He had locked up the house renter and, surprise surprise, it wasn't Heckles. My uncle had the idea that if he threatened him with eviction, he would back off. So my uncle made a big show of walking over there, knocking on the door, no dice. He hollered at me to call the cops, all bluff. He wasn't going to let the cops in on something as juicy as this. Heckles finally opened the door and asked what he wanted, totally innocent. My uncle said, "You're not the renter here." I looked it up. Heckles looked down at the ground and his reaction still blows me away. "Please don't tell anybody." So as it turned out, Heckles had known the guy renting the house since before he went in the mental hospital. You heard right, mental hospital. Heckles got out and his family had cut contact, so he decided to hit up the guy for a place to stay. Turns out that the guy had a stroke at some point and wound up in hospital. So Heckles was basically squatting in the place. Well, when my uncle was done, the guy never wanted to go near me again. I knew he got results, but I still wish he had called the cops because, for all I know, Heckles is still out there, somewhere, waiting for another unsuspecting target.
Sometimes you're the hero of your own story. Sometimes you're just a side character and only realize it at the end. Boys and girls, I present to you the Ballad of Creepy Kyle. Kyle was kind of chubby with a buzz cut that was thinning on top and a sad little attempt at a mustache on his lip. He was in his 40s or 50s and just looked like someone's creepy uncle. The restaurant I worked in at the time was family-owned and rather small. Kyle didn't have enough money to order most of the food on the menu, so he'd order an iced tea or some other beverage and sit for hours at the same table. Seeing as the restaurant was so small, that meant you had to bus your own tables, so getting Kyle in your seating was a special brand of hell. It didn't help that he wouldn't leave more than $1 tip, no matter how much he claimed to like the service. We were all favored with his affections at one point or another. Things he would do across the board: touch you on your arm a lot while ordering. I'm talking 20 to 30 times a minute. Pull ponytails, tuck his tip directly into your pocket, etc. If you made eye contact, he was your best friend for life. God help you if you smiled at him. Since he was never rude or short with us, we thought he had no social awareness and wrote him off as harmless. Alice knew better. Alice was 19, blonde and petite. Poor girl became the focus of Creepy Kyle's affections. He would always make some excuse to stand by the hostess podium so he could talk to her. He never said anything overtly sexual, but you could tell he was hitting on her and not letting her work. We would always have to tell him to leave her alone because new people had come in and she couldn't seat them with Kyle chewing her ear. The management refused to do anything about it because he hadn't crossed a line that they saw, so poor Alice had to suffer in silence. Things escalated over a period of a few months. He sent alcohol to the hostess podium. May I remind you, Alice is on the job and 9 freaking teen. Told another server that my short hair was cuter and that her hair should be short too. Whipped a pair of scissors out of nowhere, and then playfully mimed cutting a lock of her hair. The server playfully ran the fuck away and hid in the back while we dealt with him. Surprised me in the bathroom. We had no public restrooms, so the wait bots basically had to go in his little closet behind the kitchen. I was washing my hands and screamed when I saw him in the mirror. He was all like, "The door was unlocked." when he shouldn't have even been there in the first place. I was shaking while I reported it to the manager, who told me to take my 10. Kyle was there when I came back, so I just went home. Kept trying to bring us food from other restaurants. And this is more what the fuck than creepy, but the fact was that none of us were ever going to sample anything that had been through his hands first. It was actually a lot worse for Alice at the time, but none of us knew because she kept quiet about the stuff that happened outside the restaurant. He had somehow obtained her phone number and was calling her up to invite her out to sport events and other stuff like that. Sometimes he would hang around after the restaurant closed to try and see her. Usually one of us would give her a lift to the bus stop, as she had no car and there was no way we'd let her go alone. One day he was at the bus stop waiting for her, and the person giving her a lift drove away before she spotted him. When the bus was late, she decided to ditch the stop and walk. He decided that meant they were walking together, and followed her. For half an hour. She was scared of telling him to leave, so she tried outrunning him. He always caught up. Finally, she ducked inside a store and called one of the other servers to take her home. Shit hit the fan over the course of 2 days. Day 1, I was walking down the street with my earbuds in. I was enjoying some lazy Saturday shopping, mostly just walking around and enjoying the sunshine. Someone honked at me. Kyle's been driving alongside me for God knows how long in a dirty orange pickup truck. I just stand there like a frozen deer while he teases me about how loud my music was. Then he says, "Hop in the truck, sweetie, I'll give you a ride." I couldn't do anything but shake my head. I quickly ducked into the nearest store and stayed in there for 2 hours. I would go browsing in the aisles farthest away from the door, then check out the window every once in a while. I think he kept circling, because sometimes the truck was there, sometimes it wasn't. After he left, I ninja'd my way to my car and promptly drove to a friend's house and stayed there for hours. Day 2. Guess who's seated in my section? I hadn't had a chance to tell anyone about yesterday, so they saw no problem with pawning him off on me. My insides feel with dread as I give this fucker his complimentary water and prepare for hours of creepitude. Instead, Kyle hands me this large envelope and tells me to give it to Alice. It's pink and has ribbons printed on it so it looks like a wrapped present. I'm surprised I even managed to pick it up. My skin was crawling so bad. Kyle gets up and leaves at that point, so I'm almost relieved. I didn't really want to give the envelope to Alice. I didn't learn what was in it until much later, and I still feel guilty about it today. After I knocked off, I handed the envelope to Alice and explained the situation, telling her it was probably best not to open it. She did after I was gone. It was a hardcore porn mag. He'd circled out one of the model's faces in Sharpie, writing that it looked just like her and she should come to his place for a photo shoot. Alice sat down with the managers and laid everything out for them. The managers basically told her it was more trouble than it was worth to deal with the police and that it was really her problem. Alice quit that night. None of us heard from her after that, so I really hope she just pulled stakes and ran and isn't just in Kyle's basement right now. After she left, Kyle kept coming in, so the servers basically band together and told management if they didn't ban him, we would walk out together. During Sunday brunch, that finally got their attention. Kyle would still try to come into the restaurant and talk all buddy-buddy with us, and we'd immediately turn him away at the door. Thankfully, he'd leave without fuss. I didn't get the full story for some time, and when I did, it scared the shit out of me. Like the guy who verbally assaulted me at the bakery, I was only part of someone else's horror story and regret I didn't do more to protect them. So Kyle, get the fuck out and stay the fuck out.